Now, every Sunday morning, longtime independent comics creator and Indie Volt podcaster Randy Zimmerman hosts a discussion on the lighter side of comics, the more whimsical and fun comics out there on the Sunday Funnies. That's 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday on Indie Volt, indievolt.com, the Indie Volt YouTube channel, and the usual Indie Volt sites on Facebook. Listen in, won't you? Participate in the chat. Let's have some fun. See you there.
Welcome to Clever Title Pending with your host, Brian K. Morris, independent publisher, freelance hybrid author, award-winning playwright, and former mortician's assistant. Don't send him title recommendations because Brian knows exactly what he's doing. So just sit down and look pretty as Brian K. Morris scrolls through your comments and plays with his mouse. Join him on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, for Evening Pandemonium and Moonlight Madness.
And good evening, everyone. How the heck are you? Welcome to Clever Title Pending for November 24th. We're almost through November 2020. Thank goodness for that, huh? Anyway, thank you for joining us. We want to say hello to our friends on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Spotify. We're glad that you tune in. And if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, thank you for watching, whether you're doing it live and you can interact with us and our very special guest tonight, Randy Zimmerman, or you're watching us on the rerun. We hope you like what you see. And if you're watching on Facebook on the Rising Tide Publications page or the Indie Event page, please, if you like what you're viewing tonight, like the video. It helps us. It really does. And also, please like the page you're watching on because it helps us beat up the evil algorithms. And if you're watching us on YouTube, whether it's on the Brian K. Morris Rising Tide Publications page or which is really growing, thank you to our over 400 subscribers. Now, we're trying to get to 500, and you can help. So if you like this video, whether you're watching it on the aforementioned channel or Geek Insider's YouTube page, give this a thumbs up and also subscribe to the page you're watching on. Plus, ring that bell so you'll be notified of all future content that will come up on the page. And this show is brought to you by PlasmaFireGraphics.com, when the look of your book matters to you. And it's powered by GeekInsider.com, as well as Rising Tide Publications. Now, I am really excited tonight. This is a guy I've gotten to know over the last year or so. He's a fantastic broadcaster, and then it turns out he's in every other comic I own. He has an incredible career that goes back to the 80s. And we hope that you will, you've got some great questions for this man, and we will flash some of your comments on the screen and we'll read your questions as we get to them. But now I want to bring on the screen the one, the only Mr. Randy Zimmerman. Randy, how are you tonight?
I'm good. Hey, Brian, thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you very much for being here. Like I said, every time I go through like my old Arrow comics or Caliber, your name pops up. Yeah, got it in the background there. Yeah. Now, I'm going to give you a moment here. Like I tell everyone, I'm going to give you the floor and all the dirt on it. And you tell everybody who you are and why you are so darned awesome.
Don't you know who I am?
Don't you know who I am? Don't you know who this is? This is him.
Hey, everybody, I'm Randy Zimmerman. I am an alternative and comics creator, designer, everything, publisher. I published under a lot of different mastheads. I've been editor-in-chief of a few companies and ran them successfully into the ground. And I have printed and freelanced in all sorts of alternative and independent markets. I I've done everything that you can imagine in the direct market. I retailed for about 10 years. I coordinate conventions. I put books together. I create IPs. Right now, my specialty seems to be commercial sequential art for education and advertising. So especially locally here, because it pays really good. And I've been doing a lot of things for the last 10 years. For 10 years or so, I put together Flint Comics and Entertainment, which was a comics and entertainment newspaper I circulated through my county, only about a 50-mile radius around from my house. And I moved 10,000 copies of this paper every month for 100 issues. Through about 10 years worth of time, ran a bunch of conventions during that period, and really rediscovered my love of comics. And now I'm back, want to get back into the direct market, into the crowdfunding scene, and I'm podcasting with the Indie Volt Radio Network, where we do 3 shows a week, one on Tuesday night, which I'll go to right after this, one on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. that we call the Breakfast Buzz, and one that I run on Sunday mornings called the Sunday Funnies that Brian graciously runs ads for here, where we concentrate on the more lighter and whimsical side of comics. So, Brian, thanks again for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, man. Because every time I watch you on Indie Volt, which is as often as I can, you got your head down. You are, while you're broadcasting and leading the show and everything, you're still trying to get the work done.
No. That's not what I'm doing. I'm looking at. I have the screen. My screen is a gigantic Cintiq board, and so I'm actually watching how everything's going. Plus, when I'm on the air, a lot of times I'm working behind the scenes. So for your show, my hands are literally tied. I can't go over to the viral video stack that I have, or the oddball, sounds, or add to the banners, or play around behind the scenes. The only thing I have left is my bell. That's it. It's the only thing I have here.
Yeah, well, you're lucky. You're on the Dignified channel here. I've got my Nevermind the Furthermore filled with all kinds of crap, like burning dumpsters and stuff. So
I love watching that clip at the end of the show where you have, now this is the time we all kick our heads back and laugh.
I do.
That's a great clip.
That is a wonderful clip, and it's from one of my favorite movies. And for those of you who wonder what Randy is talking about, I do have it loaded on here. So here we go.
Now comes the part where we throw our heads back and laugh. Ready?
Ready!
That's classic.
That is. That's like Larry the Cable Guy. I don't care who you are. That's funny. So anyway, we've already got Sarah, one of our regulars, and I believe you know her from Indie Volt, says, hello, Randy, Brian, and Clever Morians. Be warned, I come bearing a lot of questions for this episode.
Cool. So we can handle it.
Yeah, we can. Carlene, glad to see you there, and everybody's saying hello to each other. But let's get you started here.
They're there. Okay, yeah. I see the comments. Wow, you're loaded. There we go.
Yeah, well, I'm loaded, and plus I've got a lot of comments too. How else can I get through this show? Anyway, but no, it's vaudeville all over again. It doesn't.
There we go.
It doesn't stink. It just smells that way. But anyway, no. How did you get started? Well, let's talk about first your origins. Every superhero needs an origin.
Secret origins.
Your secret origin of Randy Zimmerman.
It's not that secret.
What got you into doing? What fostered your love of comics, and specifically going into wanting to create them?
Well, it comes from having, and I don't mean this to bring the show down, but it comes from having a set of kind of abusive parents. So I was raised in a real small town, just on the northwest corner of Genesee County around the Flint area, called Montrose. It's a real small town. And I was raised in a very restrictive religion. And one that you did, you went to meetings every 3 days a week, and they wanted you to go out and knock door to door and all of this. And growing up in that, it was very restrictive. And I kept asking why, a lot of different questions. And then I ended up becoming a part of the religion back when I was 15, and I was out of it by the time I was 17. And in the meantime, I discovered comics when I was really young. My uncle gave me a book that I still have multiple copies of here, that was put out by the Walter Lantz Studio called Easy Way to Draw. And it
that.
showed how to draw Woody Woodpecker, Buzz Buzzard, Wally Walrus, and all that. And I took to it like a fish out of water. And I loved, ever since then, I always had affection for cartoons, funny animals, and comics. My parents didn't allow me to have superhero comics growing up because they considered it too violent. So what happened is, of course, that was the bright shiny for me. How come I can't read this stuff? What's going on? You know, this is supposed to be everybody talks about how great this is. So I started doing all the research, stopping at the library on my way home from school and digging up any scrap of evidence or mention of comics wherever I could find it. And this was long before graphic novels were accepted, I was the odd duck in school. The one that the kids all pointed and laughed. Oh, he just draws funny pictures and sits in the corner and all that. I used to carry a tackle box with my art supplies in it. So, comics, I fully attribute comics to keeping me sane during that period. And there were, the tangled youth, angst-ridden, and all of this, and plus the restrictive religion, plus the other restrictions, plus being up into a very, very small town. I used to walk home 2 miles from school, and that sounds like that old used to walk 2 miles uphill in the snow. But I literally used to walk 2 country miles home from school because I couldn't stand riding the bus, because I was sitting there the whole time, and I was like the next to the last stop on the bus route. And again, I was only 2 miles away from school. So I would walk home. On my way home, I'd stop at Dugan's drugstore and go through their comic rack. And eventually my parents allowed me to have superhero comics after I had my butt whooped by them finding a copy of Batman Giant Size Annual number 8, I believe it was, Giant Size 8. Red cover, all Dick Sprang stories, just classic stuff. I've been looking for a copy of that for a long time. But I got my butt whooped with a coal shovel for having it in the house because we told you not to have these violent superheroes. So it's Dick Sprang. This wasn't Neil Adams Batman. This wasn't, Englehart or Rogers Batman. That's the stuff that they do today. This was, Ace the Bat Hound and the introduction of Batwoman and all of this. So anyway, I was a big, big fan of Carl Barks's work. Anything that was funny animals, I ate up. I convinced my parents early on to let me have Adam Strange because he was just a spaceman, and it was a science fiction book. So that was okay. So I started picking up anything that I could that wasn't superheroes that I was allowed to bring in the house. And one of the things I brought in the house was Twilight Zone Digest. And the Twilight Zone Digest had a story in it about a guy making a deal with the devil. And my mom ended up picking up that digest and seeing, oh my goodness, there's a guy, it's Satanist. Oh my goodness, this guy made a deal with the devil. So she made the deal with me to allow superheroes in the house if I burned that book. So I happily threw that book on the fire, and of course, the first issue I ended up buying off of the newsstands was Shazam #1. So that's how far back this goes, Wow. And then when my brothers would raise a stink about how come he gets to, they were older at the time and going out of the house, and they were beyond comics at the time. How come he gets to buy superheroes? Well, you guys had Batman with Adam West when you were growing up. We're just going to let him have superheroes. So, and I was a huge fan of comics from that point on. Always drew them. Always wanted to learn the market. Literally soaked up any information I could find. Subscribed very early on to the Comics Buyer's Guide. Ended up buying. I actually ordered X-Men '95 through the mail from Richard Elf. That was my first mail order comic that I did because my local stores didn't carry it. They carried Giant Size 1. I was able to find a copy of 94, but I read a copy of 95 until like 96 or 98, I think, was out by the time I actually got it. I knew Thunderbird was gone because he wasn't there. But anyway, those books are real special to me. But that's really how I got into comics. My parents used to be upset because I would go and raid the stash of notebook paper and draw on it. So they ended up rationing me to 2 pages of notebook paper a day. in order to preserve their ream of paper, because I was really pouring through it. I was drawing all over. So I learned early on to take and draw lines on the paper, and there, instead of one page, you had 4 pages. So then it became real easy to start telling stories from panel to panel to panel to panel. So by the time I got into high school, I was just the comic book nerd geek fanatic. You know, I was eating up everything at that point, just anything I can get my hands on. And anyway, to go back to the drugstore, when I would walk home from school, I started straightening out the rack for them, the comic rack. And the girls would notice. And they were like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, you shouldn't do that unless we pay you. If you want to do that, we're going to give you a couple comics a week if you'll do it for us. So I started building, not only did I start building a collection, but I became the guy who got the bundle of comics on Thursday that was able to open them up and go through and make sure all the comics were in, display them on the rack. So I always got my choice of books, and I always knew what was coming out, what wasn't coming out, and what I always got to see. You know, we had 3 copies of this and 1 copy of that and 5 copies of this and that kind of thing. So I really became a big fanatic at that point. Then I got a job in Flint during my junior and senior year after school, because I just wanted to be away from home as much as possible. And they ended up giving me a car in order to drive back and forth to Flint at a hardware store after school for 3 hours a day. So then I discovered there was a bookstore that I could stop at on the way home. And that bookstore had stuff sent to them from Big Rapids distributors up in Big Rapids, Michigan. And that's how I discovered the direct market, Cerebus, all of the alternative market started opening up. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. You know, the last year of my of school, I ended up getting a job at a pinball arcade back when they had large buildings that had lots of pinball machines in them. Right. And I opened up, they had a storage room in the back. So I opened up the first comic shop within a 50-mile, maybe 20, 30-mile radius of my house. There was a store up in Saginaw named Libby's, and Curious Bookshop was open down in East Lansing. And then I had a little store and I found, you know, Big Rapids, and got to know Jim Friel really well, and got to get a direct market comics shipped to me. So I had comics 3 weeks earlier than anybody else in the area. So other than that one bookstore. Mm-hmm. So that was great. So I ended up after graduating high school, working that bookstore, working at the pinball arcade until, and I kept reading everything that come out. You know, I got to see that way. I got to literally read any book that came out that week. So I found Cerebus 6, the key issues I remember, Cerebus 6, The Burn, Austin, X-Men during that period, Fantasy Quarterly #1 come out. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is going to change things. This is awesome. Some of the black and white Marvel magazines that were coming out at the time. When we finally shut the store down, we shut the store down because the guy who owned the pinball arcade, actually, we caught him going through our books because we kept track of all of our sales. He ended up going through our books and then wanted us to start paying rent. Because before we were just the guys that were in the back and we were watching his pinball arcade, you know, and he was hardly ever around. He might pop in once or twice a week. And my buddy and I would go through and we'd literally run the arcade and run the bookstore at the same time. So, and we were amassing, 70, 80 hours a week, running the pinball arcade, keeping an eye on the bookstore. Sure. So he wanted to charge us rent. We were done. This is enough. And what was really cool at the time with the bookstores, we had gotten up enough money to buy a TV set, so we were able to sit back there and watch the reruns of Star Trek that were on in the afternoon in syndication and all of this. But once I got out of there, I ended up working at a toy store, Circus World, for a little while. Got out of there. I was working at the hardware store, then went to work at the toy store. Then I went and started working at that bookstore that had the direct market books come in. And I just stayed. I did that for a couple of years, became a manager of the entire chain, not the chain, but the northern part of the chain. Mm-hmm. And I was on Teen Titans 1 come out during that period. And I was the starry-eyed geek guy going around and catching anybody. Hey, did you like that X-Men book? You'll love this Teen Titan book. This Teen Titan book is awesome. These guys on this book are incredible. You know, I was that nerd kid that was able to sell all them books, you know.
Oh, sure.
And after that, I got back into retailing, and just didn't and got into comics, doing comics. I bumped into Justice Machine was coming out with Mike Gustovich and he at the time he was living in Grand Rapids, and I heard he was going to be at a con over there. So I went over there to meet Mike Gustovich, and he didn't make it. Even though it was like it was in the winter. I remember there being a lot of snow, but I ran across Dennis Messinger from Chicago, and he was putting together a fanzine called Just Imagine Comics and Stories. And he looked at my stuff, and my stuff tends to be a lot more cartoony because I was raised on Barks and the funny animal characters and the looser Dick Sprang and the more cartoony CC Beck, that kind of work. And he looked at my stuff and goes, "How come you're not printed? You need to do me a story and send it to me. I'll print it." So it cost me my first marriage, but I ended up doing that story and sending it into to Dennis, and he printed it. And that's what really started my career. And then after that, I met Bill Loebs when he was doing Journey, and he ran a couple stories in the back of Journey. And then I bumped into Ralph and Stu from they were putting Arrow Comics together at the time. And from that point, it was just alternative. And then anything that I could do, any type of freelance work I could get, I went out there and did it, even if it didn't pay. You know, I just went out there and did it, not just for the exposure, but more for the love of the art form. Right. You know, so every chance I had a chance to self-publish, I self-published. I took over the Arrow Comics banner when Ralph and Stu were done with it. We're not printing and wanted to give it or allow me to print it. So it's because Arrow Comics was a creator-owned, almost a commune type company anyway. Everybody owned their own stuff, and Arrow Comics really didn't own anything other than the name. So I ran the name for a while back in the early 2000s, and then I ran a ground of Diamond, who I was constantly butting heads with. And they were constantly shifting their goalpost as far as minimums and requirements, and the rep we had was just horrible. And about 2003, I decided to get out and stop doing it. Had my own apparel business for a short while with a couple of partners, and that went after about 4 years, I believe, that went south. And then just couldn't stay out of comics. You know, didn't want to work in the direct market because of Diamond. So I started the Flint Comics paper and started running with that. But I didn't stop doing conventions. I didn't stop doing shows. I was still doing an occasional freelance job whenever something came my way. Gary Reed and Caliber. I was lucky to Gary Reed got a hold of me, and we were working on a few projects together that fell through. Had a superhero book that got this close to Walmart, that close, under his Gauntlet Comics line. And and I was constantly pitching stuff and looking for work. But then that deal with Gary ended up getting me the writing gig on War of the Worlds, which Gary said, well, just pitch me something. And I said, well, I love War of the Worlds. If you're going to do classics and do adaptions of classics, I want to do an updating of War of the Worlds. And so he let me do it. And to this day, I'm really, really proud of. It's really a pulpy type story because I love those old pulps. I cut my teeth on Doc Savage early in my youth, and I was always a fan of the old pulp stuff. And I see you've done a lot of the pulp adventures. Material as well. That's on my bucket list. One of these days, I'm going to sit down and write a bunch of prose stuff. I haven't written a lot of prose work. And the prose work I have written hasn't really gone very far, but the comic book work has gone all over the place, you know, and like you said, you'll see me pop up here and there, the oddball names. The only problem now is that I get confused with Ron Zimmerman, who was a writer at Marvel for a while. And I'm like,
the Rawhide Kid, right?
That's my answer. I would never do that to Rawhide Kid. That wasn't me. That was not me.
No. For those of you who don't know, Rawhide Kid was given some very bad treatment about 15 years ago.
And if you're going to make if you're going to change a character like that, make a new character. You know, and tell that story. And there are plenty of room out there for new icons. That's what I keep saying. You don't have to keep changing the ones that are already there. Make a new one and make your mark. You know,
exactly.
But I think that catches us up to date after once I got out of 100 issues of Flint Comics. We were advertiser supported, so we gave it away for free. We had little red boxes all around the county, so that you could just walk up once a month, take a funny book, And for me, that was I did the publication that I always wanted to read when I was growing up. It had a combination of syndicated strips, comic book stories, single panel strips, just odd columns in it. I had a column by a xenobiologist not a xenobiologist, xenomorph. Anyway, he was into the odd X-Files type creatures and abductions and that kind of thing, only local. So it had a lot of Michigan flavor to it. I had a guy who was a hardcore rock and roller that wrote a column of everyday life. I had a comedian who wrote a column just on the funny side of things. And then we picked up a couple of columns like News of the Weird and Strange But True, that kind of stuff that we ran in there. And I used to call it Flint's favorite bathroom reader. Nothing would please me more than to have somebody send me a picture of it draped over the handrail and somebody's stall. That was the whole purpose behind the paper. And one thing, like I said, it reinstilled my love of comics. And the one thing I realized is almost everybody loves comics, unless you don't have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And there's a certain percentage of people out there that just don't find anything funny.
Yeah.
And the magazine or the paper really didn't go for them. But I had people calling me if I was a day late on the paper. They would call me up out of the blue. Is this Flint Comics? Yes, sir, it is. How can I help you? Where's the paper? Well, who is this? Don't worry about me. Where's the paper? So I had to get up on Facebook back when Facebook was raging and literally give reports of I'm working on the next issue now. The next issue is late, but it's going to press immediately. It's gone to press. It's gone to the distributor. It's going to be on the stands by such and such a date. Hope you enjoy the copy. And I'd always post the cover as soon as I had it done. And that worked out really well for quite a few years. And we were advertiser supported again. So you just pick up and take it. One of the local, I had all the local comic shops advertising in the paper. One of the local comic shops said, "Hey, you finally found the price point for Flint." And they said they knew they would know somebody had come in off of the paper when they'd walk through the comic shop and you'd get that big look in their eyes and they'd look around like they'd never been there before. And it was obvious. And then when they asked them, it was always from the paper. I saw your ad in the paper, thought I'd swing by and see what you were all about.
Very cool.
So, yeah. And like I said, everybody loved comics, Yeah. I was, and we would move this anywhere, we'd set up at festivals and that. I was set up at a rock and roll festival, had a big biker guy who was like twice as big as me come riding up in his motorcycle and saw the Flint Comics display. "Hey, you do that Flint Comics paper?" And I'm like, "Oh boy, what am I, Yeah, I'm afraid I do, sir. What's up?" He goes, "I got to show you something." And he rolls up his sleeve, big muscle, twice as big arm as me. He's got a Leo comic strip tattooed. And I printed Leo. Had Leo tattooed all around his bicep. "I love this strip. This is hilarious." Wow. Cool, dude.
That is fantastic.
Like I said, it just really, because at the time, before I started the paper, I was really down on comics. I was down on the direct market. And Diamond especially, still am not very happy with Diamond. But that's a whole other story.
That's another show.
Yeah, but that paper literally reinstilled the love of the art form in me and reminded me that of the fan that I was and that I am. And I always I've got a sketchbook that I used to take to shows back when I was doing Aero Comics, doing a lot of freelancing. And I would track people down that I admired and have them either sign or put a sketch in the book. So the front and back cover is just loaded with signatures. And anybody who would charge for a signature, I'd show them the book and I'd say, well, the only person's signature I ever paid for was Steranko. And that's because I wanted his signature. He was charging $10 for a signature. This is just a couple years ago. So it's not like he's always been charging, and which I understand. I understand, artists wanting to charge for a signature if they see their stuff on eBay with an extra 10 or 20 bucks loaded on it for, it's autographed. But he looked through the book and he saw I had already paid. And he like looked at me and he looked at the book and he looked at the paper because I gave him the paper. And I said, I'd have never printed in this format if it wasn't for your media scene.
Right. Yeah.
And he went, "Yeah, because there's so much space." I said, "Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And he looked at it and says, "Where do you want me to sign this?" I said, "Take a page." He goes, "You want me to take a page? I'll take a page." And Stranko is awesome. I love the guy to death. He takes out a big marker and does his palette with a couple of brushes, signature, all over a page. I'm like,
nice.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah,
that is great.
Yeah.
So why'd you quit doing Flint Comics?
We ran into the Flint water crisis head on.
Right.
Where literally the money in that we became economically depressed, about as bad as what the whole country probably is now, thanks to the virus. But
you were leading the way.
Flint's always led the way when it comes to the economy. Always, we were the start. We were the melting pot here in Flint. We were the magnet for the immigrants and migrants for that had to come and work in the shop. In fact, my wife's grandfather is pure Mexican, and he has a big reputation for tamales, and knows, or had a big reputation. He lived to be 106. Was an awesome guy. Lots of stories. He would always tell us the story. He could always get fired if he didn't like a supervisor at one shop. He could always tell that supervisor off, go walk across the street and go work at the other plant. Got a job the next day. Boom.
Right.
Didn't like this guy. Now I'm working over here. and yeah, that's how it was here in Flint. But when that water crisis, we were already economically depressed because GM and outsourcing and all of this. But when the water crisis happened, all of the mom and pop money dried up. As far as, especially with advertising and especially with digital coming in. And we had a couple of our anchor sponsors. We had a couple of really big sponsors that were always there for us every month, that they changed their marketing director. And once they changed that marketing director for somebody younger, they decided that they weren't going to do print anymore. They were all digital and billboards. That's all that they wanted to do. So they ended up dropping their ads at the end of their contract. So we were able to go pretty steady for about 75 issues. And then it was starting to get harder and harder to get advertising. And then the last year I cut back to bi-monthly, and we were still having a rough time surviving. And so it got to be in the high 90s. And I said, I'm going to 100. I'm going to do 100 because I want to do 100. 100's a good place to stop. And that's where we stopped.
That's awesome. 100 issues of anything in any comic market is quite an accomplishment.
That's what I figured. It was a good number. So.
Yeah, that is nice round number.
Issue 99, I advertised a special next to last issue too. So I had everybody calling up. Are you going to stop? What's going on? It's like, yep, I'm going to stop. So, and then the issue 100 we printed was their special last issue. We commemorated the 10 years that we were out. And I don't think I can back up far enough. But
hold on. Let me give you the whole screen then. Hold on. Okay,
let me move my chair back a little bit here. The paper not only opened up, normally it opened up like a regular paper like this, but we went one more fold so that we could go really big and put a tremendously huge poster in it to thank everybody for 10 great years, 100 great issues, and 1 million copies moved.
That is sweet.
And there were times that I would get maybe a couple dozen back at the most, depending upon the time of year of the paper. So the paper was that well read, Nice. Whether we were somebody's bird liner, I'm not sure. I know we ended up in bathrooms in quite a few places. I would walk into our local Italian restaurant, and they would take a couple of the pages and stick them on a bulletin board right above the urinal so that you had something to look at while you were relieving yourself. And I took a couple pictures of that and posted them. That was like, yes.
Oh, that's funny.
That's what the paper was there for. But yeah, everybody loves comics,
Yeah. So how'd you get hooked up with Varian Grant and Indie Volt? What turned you into a broadcaster?
Well, Varian was coming to the show. I would run a show once a year up here in Flint at the farmers market. And the farmers market they had an award-winning farmers market up here, and then they moved into a new headquarters, which was the old Flint Journal printing press factory.
Right.
And it was a huge place. And they contacted me and said, "Hey, we know you run the show at the Masonic Temple once a year. What's it going to take to have you do the convention with us?" And I said, "Well, if I'm going to do that," because it was rough. Working at the Masonic Temple that we have here in Flint was built in like 1910. And it's literally from the outside, it looks like it's 3 stories. This is the amazing architectural wonder of the Masons. Looked like it was 3 stories tall, but it was actually 6 stories, and it had all sorts of little back rooms and just crazy little entrances and exits. Had 3 massive auditoriums in the building.
Wow.
Don't ask me how they did it, because it was like walking into a TARDIS and going, you'd walk up, you'd go up the elevator to a floor, walk out down a hall, huge auditorium. And you're like, holy crap. And you'd walk back into the elevator, go up another 2 floors, walk out, walk down a hall, another huge auditorium. Like, where did these come from? It was crazy. But but their main hall, you had to go up a set of stairs and go up. The only elevator they had up to it was a handicapped elevator. And it was only meant for 300 pounds or less. So getting dealers in and out of the show was like next to impossible.
Oh, yeah.
So I gave the farmers market here in Flint a list of demands, not really demands, but I went through and said, well, we're going to need to do this. We're going to have this. And they just went, yeah, okay, no problem. Yeah, okay, no problem. Yeah, okay, no problem. We want your show. Yeah, okay. And then, I told them how much I had been paying before, and they matched the price. And I'm like, well, no brainer. Okay, so we took over the community room and half of the atrium, and Varian would come up and sell Last Call comics up there. And then soon after that, Varian was doing he wanted to do a 4-panel strip in the paper. So he started doing a 4-panel strip in the paper about a little drunk elf. I don't have the camera over here, but I said, he can't drink beer. We're a family friendly paper, but he can act drunk, Yeah. He just can't sit there and, tell everybody about the wonders of alcohol.
Right.
Because the last thing we need is another angry mom mob, which I had gotten a couple of at one time or another. So, because you can't please everybody. That's another thing I learned with the paper. You can't always please everybody with everything. We would run, and we had the Judge Dredd adventure strip that we would run. And I'd run whole Judge Dredd stories in a month. Just boom, 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 all of the strips in a row. Right. Just so that when they asked me at the syndicate, what would you like? Is there anything that we can get for you that you want to run, that you see that we have, that we can sell you for syndicate? Because they saw me spending money. And I says, well, I see you've got listed the Judge Dredd and the James Bond strip. And there was a silence over the phone there. Nobody asks us for adventure strips anymore.
Wow.
She goes, I don't even know if we have the North American rights for that. And the rep says, I'm going to check into that and call you back. Okay. Next day she called me back and says, yeah, we have North American rights for both Judge Dredd and James Bond. Do you want them? Heck yes, I do. So I was running James Bond and Judge Dredd through. Judge Dredds are really cool. And that's for Flint. I figured that would be kind of a great subversive type strip because of the political statement that's always being, nobody picked up on that. But run one scantily clad woman in a James Bond comic or a comic strip, and boom, you hear from the moms.
Right.
So I ran one picture, and it was smaller than a postage stamp, of an exotic dancer who had flowers for pasties.
Right.
Over in front of the important parts. Mm-hmm. One mom turned into 10 moms, turned into oh boy. So I figured I'd get away with it because it was a pasty, but no. So from there on, I'm going through with a large, with a black Sharpie, not a Sharpie, really more like it was a rapidograph, and emphasizing all of the bikinis and putting tops on all the nude girls or all the topless girls. Because over in Europe, they have a whole different standard for what's acceptable nudity from what we have here in the States. Oh, yeah. And learn that really quick. So. But yeah, what was the question? Sorry, you get me started. We're just going to go off.
No. I love it. I love hearing this. But we were asking you. You've met Varian Grant. He's doing work for you. Now we're leading up to Indie Bolt.
So Varian comes up to me one day and says, "I want to do my own convention. I want to do a 2-day show." And I said, "No, you don't." I said, "So you don't know how much work goes into this." This is, I do a 1-day show at a farmer's market where I have complete cooperation from the people here. I mean, they're beautiful people. Right. And I says, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. And you need to really do some research. You got to, as we say on Indie Volt, got to get an education as to what you're doing. So he went out and got an education, and he was like, I don't think I really want to do that. I'm like, told you. So and then he was telling me that he had gotten the internet radio station rolling, and he wanted to start doing a podcast. And then it got around to I'd like to do a regular podcast, and I wanted to get back into comics. I mean, into regular mainstream comics, because at the time I was doing a couple other commercial things that were really good. I mean, sequential art type stuff also, because the paper literally opened a bunch of doors for me, because every time in the paper I ran an ad for me in there as well. So, Zimm Graphics, logos, cartoons, whatever. Got a lot of clients that way. Got a lot of money. So whenever you see me on Facebook going, I'm in the middle of a commercial job. I'm in the middle of a commercial job. But anyway, like for example,
always promote.
Always promote.
Yep.
My city real estate, my city home from a few months ago, I did an ad for them that landed in their center spread for a real estate company.
Oh, that's nice.
Talking about the different homes.
Uh-huh.
How you go from your parents' house to your starter home to your family home to your you move into the larger condo when the kids leave the house, to all the way down to getting that recreational house on the lake down in Florida. And these folks would be able to provide all of those different steps for you. So that was an ad that I did for them that was pretty successful, a lot of fun. But I also do the preservers for the Genesee County Parks and Recreation, which is a superhero team that I created to teach kids about. I co-created with the group that was there at the park system, in order to teach kids about conservation, preservation. So once a year, I put a trail together for them, which is like a collection of Sunday pages that they put on gigantic boards they're really big. They're about 3 feet by 2 feet tall, rectangular, just like a regular Sunday comics page, that they stick on turtle signs that they put on poles and then stick all around the nature preserve that they have. So you can actually walk a nature trail once a year and read a comic story as you walk. So it's kind of like a scavenger hunt, where you're looking for the signs, you're reading the story, and you're getting a good walk in at the same time, all the way around the nature preserve. So, and I've done that for I've done it 6 times now. And then once a year, we throw them together into a book, a comic that they give away at the nature preserve. And if I turn that any farther, I'm going to have that Viking helmet on Yoda fall over. I don't have one handy, but anyway, we put them together into comic books, and then they give them away at the Welcome Center at the Nature Preserve.
That's beautiful.
It's a lot of fun.
Beautiful. It sounds like it. And it's good that you're able to, indulge your love of comics, not just reading, but producing them as well.
Yeah.
Because like when I was growing up, I heard the old slogan about 95% of comic fans want to be in comics, and the other 5% are lying. But you're staying in the field, and this is why people like Neil Adams are still doing advertising. The money's there. That's because the larger companies don't want to pay a per page rate that's reflective to the amount of time and work that goes into doing the effort. Right. That's the big problem. And that the Nature Preserve gig got me a national gig with the National Recreation and Parks Association, where I created a team of superheroes for them. Got to charge them like a lawyer. It was awesome. Oh man,
it was really, really good. I created a set of 4 characters for them. Sold them the rights to the characters. We went from the ground floor up over a couple of Skype calls with the main company or the association over in Washington D.C. and got that nationally distributed through their magazine, and they had it given away. They also did a 6-page comic featuring all the characters and explaining why they were important. We had one character talking about conservation, one character, or a pair of twins like the Wonder Twins, talking about health and fitness, and a social justice warrior character that was literally a social justice warrior.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, that was talking about all of the different aspects of the Parks and Rec and the advantages of going to your local Parks and Recs. And it was a lot of fun. They have the rights to those characters. I told them I'm available if they ever need to do it again. And they ended up winning an award, a couple of big awards for best presentation among the association whatever. There's some sort of year-end awards for each of the different charities and associations, and they got best unique presentation and best presentation of the year that year for it. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Very cool.
So technically, well, not really technically, but I am an award-winning commercial and graphic artist.
That's better than my award winning. That's why I have to use air quotes. My only award came from not killing a man. So
well, there you go.
And I earned it. But anyway,
that sounds like a story.
It is. I'll tell it to you sometimes. I'm an award-winning playwright, and the funny thing is, I've used that to parlay my credits for over 20 years.
Cool.
And the only people who have ever asked me about the quotes that I always put around it, none of them are writers. None of them have been editors or publishers. It's always been like somebody comes up and looks at the book. How come we got quotes around it? Award-winning? Okay, here's the story. I didn't kill someone. Oh, okay, I get it. So, anyways, we've got some questions. Would you like to take some questions from our wonderful
awesome
audience?
Always, yeah, sure.
All right, well, we're going to start with Sarah and goes, Randy Zimm, how much of comic book creating is business versus writing the story? What business work goes into this from start to finish? And that's a great question, because a lot of people don't realize how much we independent contractors have to do to get the working, etc. But
well, just think of the larger corporations that are out there that have all of these people working up at the bullpen offices doing all of these different assigned jobs, creative licensing and blah, 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 and all that. And you are all of those rolled into one. If you're lucky, maybe two or three, if you've got enough people to cooperate with you to work a company. But exactly how much business goes into it depends upon how much business you want to do. And you have to promote, you have to brand yourself, you have to know a little marketing and be able to get out there and talk to people, whether at conventions or on podcasts or wherever you can possibly be heard, excuse me, and get out there and promote your stuff, and while at the same time doing your stuff. So it's an interesting little juggling act, and sometimes one ball drops, and while the other ones are still in the air and you're waiting for it to fall, you really have to figure that out. And everybody has a different system. There's no magic formula where you need to dedicate 50% to your business and 50% to your writing, because any true artist will tell you sometimes they get on a roll and time is just gone. You're there creating a book and a week goes by or a month goes by and you're like, oh, maybe I should start promoting. It's difficult to say for a set formula. You just have to know how to do it, learn how to do it. That's the big thing. So that's something we really push on IndieVolt, that I love pushing on IndieVolt, to tell people, do your research, get an education, always go. You can't learn enough. That's something that I did before I started podcasting with Varian, as I sat down and started, and that's how I really got into with Varian, interested in podcasting, because Varian would call me up and go, did you hear this guy's video on YouTube? I don't even know who that guy is. You should go and listen to such and such, or let me send you a link and see how this goes. And I'm sitting there listening to that stuff going, Varian, we could do that. We should do that. We should just sit there and talk. That's all we have to do. Is just talk about what we love, and it's not difficult once you get used to it. Once you realize that, like here, I'm just talking to Brian. He has thousands of listeners, but I'm not seeing them. I'm talking to Brian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it's, like I used to do the pledge breaks during our local PBS show. And I knew if I thought, that there's 5,000 people listening to me right now, I'm going to choke.
Yeah.
But I always introduced myself to the camera person. And that's who I was talking to.
Yeah.
So that's how you get through it. You find the tricks that help you get through this stuff.
Right. And it's important to go out there and get the widest reach that you possibly can. And with Varian, he's got that internet radio station working where he's already built up a listening audience.
Yeah.
And now there's a listening audience that's building up that loves comics, that are starting to listen to those podcasts when they kick off live. So we're seeing 30, 40, 50, we've gotten up to 86,000 people all over the world that are listening. And I know that works, because I'm like going, he's not really getting those numbers. That's kind of crazy. He's not getting. But all of a sudden, my friends list on YouTube doubles, or not YouTube, but on Facebook doubles. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting here every day now. It's like at least 5 people, and it's always from the weirdest places. from all over the world. And I'm like, are you into comics? He's into comics. Boom, he's a friend. You know, he loves comics as much as I do, even if I can't, you know, read his translation or everything's in Russian or whatever. And, you know, you have to be careful and weed out the spammers. But you'll obviously all you got to do is travel down their timeline a little bit to see if they're into comics or not, or who their friends are. Mm-hmm. And my friends list has literally doubled since we started the podcast. And it's from people from all, and we've met so many awesome people from all over the Glenn Fleming, who you know.
Yeah.
Glenn's you know, met him, Russ Leach out of England, Marv out of Portugal, just crazy. Yeah. The Stinch out of Norway. I think he's Norway or Netherlands. Uh-huh. Anyway, just from all over the world. If they can get on the air, add to the chat room, and if they're into comics, we bring them on board and just have a good discussion. So
and I've had fun, you know, when I've been on there too. So, you know, it's a great environment.
Well,
you learn so much. You learn so much about different levels of different areas of comic books.
We try to keep away from drama as much as possible and talk about the positive aspects of comics and the stuff that people want to learn. You know, there's a lot of people out there who will troll and want dirt, and we try not to. Varian likes to throw some dirt around every once in a while, but that's Varian. So, but I really look at it as an educational tool because we've answered so many awesome questions, like what you have here in the chat, that we can talk to people about comics. So
sure. Oh, yeah. And in fact, we've got another question from Sarah. I'm not sure exactly what she's asking, but the financial ballpark of comic creation through distribution. Now, there are different ways to distribute comics, you know, that, there's crowdfunding campaigns. There's the aforementioned Vilified Diamond, which is now getting some competition. And we've said on our show that, you know, we welcome it. But
I think you're going to see Diamond get a lot more competition in the years to come, which is a good thing. Back when we first started doing Arrow Comics, we had 27 different distributors, and I didn't realize how many until we had Stu on the Sunday Funnies program. He remembers that number because he counted them and kept track of them all the time. And we were always shipping stuff out all over the place. So, and we need to get back to that because the more distributors, the more distribution you get. You know, it's that simple.
Well, yeah, I remember when I was managing a shop in East Central Illinois. We had Glenwood. Glenwood was our second, and then when they started going to hell, we went with Diamond. Mm-hmm.
And so did everybody. So,
that's it. That's how they got the stranglehold on the industry. But we still had Capital City, and when my Diamond reps started getting uppity with me about. Like, well, I need a reorder. Well, I don't feel like going down to the warehouse. Okay, fine. I'll call Capital City. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, Capital City, when you say, hey, my Diamond rep can't get anything for me, I didn't mind playing those two guys against each other because our customers got what they wanted that way.
And Capital City was awesome, too.
They were.
They were a really good distributor.
They really were. I was really
really good for the independents. Yeah, I was, too.
Yeah, because they carried my old photocopied stuff.
Yeah.
So God bless them.
They carried a lot of awesome stuff.
They really did. And Sarah has a new question. What is your experience with comic book business, Brian and Zimm? And what have you seen work or drag someone under as a creator? Wow.
You want me to take it?
Yeah. I was going to say, if you've got one right in mind, go for it.
Well, Brian and I have been around long enough to see a lot of different stories, I'm sure. He's seen them. I've seen them. There's all sorts of pitfalls out there, and it can be an angry spouse to running out of money to running into Diamond to there's any of a number of stumbling blocks that can happen in their art team going south. Most of the time it's money. Though money can't get together fast enough, or it doesn't get together. I've had a lot of IPs offered or a lot of proposals that I've pitched to companies that have gotten this close, and then the money is that far away, and it just doesn't come off.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Trevor Hawkins, who does a lot of my book covers and is a big comics fan, asks, do you think there will be a time when comics and graphic novels will be just under the same umbrella of process as fiction and nonfiction books? Like, are we looking at a period, like we've become mainstream? Look at the Hollywood. You know,
The
they're
independent.
the independent stuff. You know, do you think there will be a time when comic books will be held in the same regard? Now, like right now, there is a big kerfluffle with AT&T and DC Comics, and all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of rumors flying
Mm-hmm.
about how long DC is going to be in business. Although, if you know they do stay in business, it's going to be a different animal. You know, in just a few months. But you know, could there be a you know, like you brought up a point, you know, do you think there could be a time when we get like a little more visibility on the independent comics market, or do you think there might be a time when comics are in the foreseeable future when any comic is given the same gravitas as say a film, you know, even an indie film, for instance?
Well, a lot of the films are going to have a hard time getting distributed here for the next couple of years. I think they're going to have a real rough time, especially if theaters don't reopen. But who's it? Hawkins? Tim Hawkins?
Trevor Hawkins. We have a whole bunch of Hawkins here, so I'll guide you through it.
Again, this is like comics and business. Brian and I have been in the business long enough to see the evolution of the direct market and how so many different things have changed. And what we predict now could be completely irrelevant in a week. So quickly. Look at how fast DC decides on 2 distributors, suddenly decides on 1 distributor. Suddenly there's rumors flying that they're not going to have any distributors. Mm-hmm. I honestly think, as far as the process goes, that we are gaining ground and have been gaining ground for years. It's just that we are our own worst enemy as far as comics go, because we've been stuck in a level of Beavis and Butthead mentality that I call Beavis and Butthead mentality for too long. And it's been like 30 or 40 years, and we literally need to grow up. And by growing up, I don't mean getting dark, getting more depressing, getting more realistic, because that's not what every comic should be. Yes, there should be Watchmen. Yes, there should be Dark Knight. There should be, I don't know if there should be Killing Joke, but that's a personal matter.
Amen, brother. Amen.
But there should also, you go back to when comics were really selling. You go back to the 50s, and it's a very interesting time because you literally saw comics starting to split into 2 audiences. One audience was a family-oriented, mostly kids, readership of whimsical, fun books. And there was another audience that was growing up with comics, that were reading EC Comics and Crime Does Not Pay. And Crime Does Not Pay was selling millions on the stands. And yeah, some kids were picking up the crime comics. Some kids were picking up the horror comics, just like they would go and see a horror movie at the theater. But and they got branded as being the part of juvenile delinquency that had to be stopped. And comics were literally stifled. Well, what really happened, if you look at the story back then, is yes, they drove that home almost like what you would call fake news, that comics were responsible for juvenile delinquency. But these comic companies wanted to stifle the higher selling, more adult books, because they were down to the little to the spiral rack there in the drugstores, and they only wanted so many sections of that spiral rack, and they wanted most of them for themselves. So you had companies out there that pushed that comic code authority through. This will stop all of the problems. And if you go back and you read the original comic code authority, you will see that they intentionally shut down titles on purpose. And it was the higher selling, more adult oriented titles. So they literally castrated the market down to kiddie literature, or at least kiddie literature in the mind of the reading audience. And that's a process that we've been fighting to get back for decades. The alternatives almost got there in the 80s when they were doing the black and white books, because you were starting to see some really interesting, some very diverse books like Love and Rockets coming out and raging, like Flish Police coming out and raging. Sure, you had Turtles, and you had some bad books coming out, Samurai Santa and the generic comic, and all of the people taking advantage of the system. Right. But there was a period there in the late 80s, right before Image started and soaked up all of that retailer money, that comics were really turning out to be incredibly diverse in a very beautiful and interesting way, which we are just barely now starting to get back to, thanks to the crowdfunding era. where now people are going out and doing crowdfunding campaigns and finding out that there's an audience for books based on different subjects that aren't necessarily the same thing that you're seeing at in the retail shops. You're seeing more Westerns. You're seeing a lot more fantasy books out there. You're seeing some really great, diverse properties out there being tried and being successfully funded that are quality material. And I think you're going to see a little bit better renaissance out of that market and out of the crowdfunding market. But I also think, and this is me being a speculative here, and from my experience of working in this paper, that sooner or later somebody's going to come out with a physical format and a means to distribute it that's not necessarily going to go through those retailers. So there's been talk about dollar stores carrying dollar comics, which there are plenty of dollar stores out there that we can distribute to if we can just find the right format and find the right person willing to take the right chance at the right time with the right product. And you're going to see it happen. You're going to see there's enough entrepreneurs out there that are going to end up doing that eventually. So you might see a huge renaissance. And I think that comics that right now desperately needs to split into two. You need to have your high art books. You need to have your realistic and your whimsical books in that high art category. But you also need disposable comics. You need to have comics that kids can go out and look for and buy and roll up and stick in their back pocket and destroy and mutilate all over they want. Back in the 50s and 60s, they had comics that used to wrap bubble gum. You know, Bazooka Joe used to be a big thing. You used to buy comics out of the 25-cent machine that were really small, dinky books. And you're still seeing the chick publications out there now, which is really cool. That, the content might be objectionable, but the format is awesome. And you see that sitting at truck stops or wherever. What's to stop somebody from trying that again? Nothing, except for an entrepreneurial spirit and a willingness to go out there and try. Because if I wasn't in Flint, you know, and we didn't have that water crisis come out, I would probably still be doing Flint comics and entertainment.
Yeah.
Can almost guarantee you.
Yeah, because I think you bring up a good point about distribution and all. I think one of the things that's going to limit a lot of creators is when they say, "I can't wait to get into Diamond."
Yeah.
You know, and the market, for those who don't know, back in the 90s, before an implosion happened, because of so many speculators in the field, that we had something like somewhere around like 7,200 to 8,000 comic shops just in America and Canada alone.
Diamond initially started with 9,000 outlets, 9,000 customers, and they have now successfully, and that's not anything to be proud of, whittled themselves down to about 1,200. Yeah, and it's quite honestly, I totally blame Diamond for that. I completely do, and I point that finger right at him. And there's when comic history is done being written, I think Diamond's going to come down in comics history just as popular as the Comic Code Authority. When it's all said and done, as to how badly they have stifled this industry. And you're seeing a direct kickback on that right now with crowdfunding books. Because those crowdfunding books, you got to sit there and go, where's all that money coming from? That money is coming from all of the angry and frustrated and depressed and fans that love comics, that left comics because those books stopped being for them. And they got fed up with the quality. They decided that X-Men collection wasn't that important. All of the talent was gone, and the characters are doing who knows what anymore. They aren't being heroes. They're not being superheroes. And they left. And that's another thing for the retailers that they ought to be looking out for. They ought to be looking for a company or maybe even another
to your dictionary,
entrepreneurial spirit.
Left is a person on the liberal side of politics or on the
I don't know how my phone picked that up.
An example of being on the political left is approach.
Let me shut that off. Holy crap.
Yeah, it's like, is Alexa having a meltdown?
Alexa's trying to talk politics with me. How do you like that?
Alexa, we don't allow that sort of talk on this show. You can swear,
always
but no.
They're always listening. There's got to be a company that's getting ready to come out there with an entrepreneurial enough spirit who wants to appeal to the retailers to do old style, old fashioned comics, and which aren't being done now. You're not seeing it. And the first company that does do that goes out and realizes there's a huge workforce out there, whether you want to admit it, whether they want to see it or not. You can see it on Facebook. All you have to do is go out and find your favorite comic artist, dig them up on Facebook if they're still alive. And granted, a lot of these great guys have passed on. They're still out there. They're still doing commercial commissions. They're still doing drawings. I just discovered yesterday that Ron Friends is actually working on a comic book. And Ron Friends has been on Facebook doing these amazing commission pieces. Just beautiful, just so close to like a John Buscema. And I'm sitting there going, Ron Friends, wow, that's just incredible stuff. And then just yesterday, I think he popped up a page of a book he's working on. It's like, oh man, I was wondering, because if I had the money, I'd be calling going, what's your page rate, dude? Because I can make a story. We can find and all it's going to take is somebody that's entrepreneurial enough to realize the home for comics is in those IPs. The home is in doing old-fashioned superhero book or adventure books or pulp level properties that move, that give kids a sense of wonder and people in general enough entertainment value for them to want to read the books. And that's the key. The majority of these mainstream companies, Marvel and DC especially right now, are barely getting by on the people that have to collect in order to fill their collection. They have to have every variant cover. They have to have the next issue that I'm not enjoying the book since Captain America become a Nazi, but I'm still buying them, Yeah. They are literally running on fumes, and they know it. All you got to do is look at their numbers. They know it. And all it will take is a good entrepreneur or two or three to step up and start comic companies that bring back the old flavor. You don't have to be backdated. It doesn't have to look like an 80s book unless it wants to. Doesn't have to look like a 40s book unless it wants to, and it should. But there's a reason why all of these books used to sell, and I can't help but see the possibility of that happening again. It's just going to take somebody to do it.
I hear you. Well, we've got a question now from Nick Talkert of the Historical Fencing Guild.
And do it soon, because us old guys are not getting any younger.
That's true. And if anybody's got an open checkbook, I've got a couple properties that we need to talk about. Because Randy and I we're in the same rowing in the same direction here. I agree with you completely. Nick Tucker asks, how do you think Amazon branching into comics and graphic novels will affect small independent companies?
Well, I have a brother who is an author who has a large Amazon account. He does kids books, mostly picture books. He's done a science fiction book and a couple other novels. Mm-hmm. But he did kids picture books, and he called me up one day and said, man, I'm making money on that Amazon. And I told him flat out, fine, you're making money now, but you're not going to make the same amount of money in a couple months, because as soon as Amazon smells that the independent guy is making money, they're going to slam him. Yep. And they did that. They did it again just recently, and they're going to keep doing it because they have to cater to their main clientele base, which are the bigger companies. So you got the bigger companies coming in, reining everything in. Hey, you can't do that because this person's making too much money. What's going on here? We need our guys out in front. You need to promote our guys instead of your actual sales, blah, blah, blah. You have to realize that these large corporations are only out there to help the other large corporations. The independent guys have got to go out there and be that independent entrepreneurial spirit and get past that. Sure, there's a great place to make money now. But are you going to make the same money? Look at how YouTube, you name your platform, how your platforms have evolved over the last few years, getting more stringent, changing their algorithms, doing this or that, trying to keep the little guy out. You have to find your own path, especially if you're going to be an independent alternative company. And that means you're going to have to get away from Amazon. You're going to use them. Right now, use them as a source for income. Diamond, same way. Use them as a source of income. Don't rely on them. Don't depend on them, because tomorrow, and that's something I saw with Diamond back at the early 2000s, they keep changing their minimums and move them up until they chased enough people out. They're still changing their silly rules, their retail committees or whatever they have to do in order to get a book with listed in their catalog.
Yeah.
Don't depend on the large corporations to get you through. Build your business on them, but don't depend on them. Don't let them become a crutch. Don't let Comixology become a crutch. Don't let Amazon be your main source of income, or Diamond be your main source of income. Diversify, and get yourself out there and do that as many side hustles as you can get, because that's how you're going to survive.
Right. Well, it's like back in the 80s. I'm friends with a guy, Ron Franz, who did Ace Comics
Okay.
back
Yeah.
in the back in the 80s, and he tells a lot of stories about how distributors were going under all the time
hmm
back in those days because shops were going under all the time as they were bad business people, lack of funds, etc., etc. um, but the thing is, so many people depend on the direct market for
hmm
sales, and that's why I'm excited to see things like DC and other people trying to put comics in Walmart. And like you were saying about the dollar stores, it's a new venue. And, it's just crazy to try to rely strictly on the direct
Yeah.
sales market. And also, like you said, we've got crowdfunding now that are funding a lot of fantastic projects.
Well, Walmart's tried comics for many, many years.
Yeah.
They went through deals with Caliber. They went through a deal with Stormquest, I believe. They went through Marvel Ultimate line.
Yeah.
That's why there were only 6 Ultimates, was because they were going through Walmart.
That's right. That's right.
DC, in my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, DC blew their opportunity with the 100-page Super Spectaculars because they had a freaking awesome format, had a freaking awesome price break, but they had horrible store coverage. You had to literally hunt them down on the Pokemon card section because the distributors, the magazine around here in Michigan, the distributor, same distributor that was distributing comics back when I was unpacking them at the bookstore, right, is distributes comics 3 weeks behind what the actual sale date is.
Wow.
Because they don't care about comics. They just throw them in a corner, and when it gets to be time, or they put them in some sort of rotation. 3 weeks later, they come out. When DC kicked out their 100-page spectaculars, the first issues came out on time. They had a fit, and they went to Walmart and said, "Hey, that's the periodical. We distribute periodicals in Walmart. We're going to distribute this from now on." And Walmart said, "Well, of course you are." So that they would get their taste. And so we had a 3-week lag after those first issues come out. 3 weeks later, the first issues come out again. And that have always been running 3 weeks behind because that's the way that they work their comics, even though they're in pop-up point of purchase displays. And still at the Pokemon card section instead of over where the other magazines are.
Yeah.
And the Alliance Arts books come out quarterly. And that's, I have yet to see the third issues of those come out to the Walmarts or hear that they're available. So they're constantly trying stuff. But and a side note on the DC 100-pager books, Ultimate format, great price point, even though they had bad point of purchase displays, the content on them books were horrible. That was if I was the reprint editor up there running those 100-pagers, they would have gotten a whole spectrum of stuff, and there would have been a real lighthearted Batman book out because Batman, the main audience, people that know Batman, barely know the Kevin Nolan or the Christopher Nolan Batman,
Right.
But they do know the Adam West Batman, and you kick those old Dick Sprang stories out, and you'd be amazed at what the market. But they don't want to do that. They want to stay so-called contemporary. And when they do stay contemporary, then they have to worry about, like I did with the paper, about the angry mom mob. So all of the girls who were dressed scantily, especially back during your Michael Turner days and the period of time that they figured that they needed to reprint, they had to go through and change the costumes. They had to raise the back part of Wonder Woman's outfit so that butt crack didn't show. They had to fill in some cleavages here and there. They had to change the roundness of the females, which Michael Turner was known for, drawing beautiful, sexy women. They had to tone all of that down so the moms didn't get mad. And they blew, in my opinion, they blew a great opportunity to get some really self-contained issues out there. 'Cause back when I bought those 100-pagers when I was a kid, there was 10, 20 self-contained, no, not 20, 10, maybe 12 self-contained stories every issue. Yeah. And you read an old Sandman story, you read an old, but even the Batman stories that when they started running new material in the front, it was all self-contained. It always ended so that you can, you had a product that was 100 pages. And as a kid, those 100 pages were amazing. And it didn't matter what they print. Oh, here's Boy Commandos. Never heard of them before. Guess I'll read it.
Yeah, I think the only one I didn't buy at the time was the Love comic one.
But nobody did. That's why it's so expensive.
Exactly, yeah. But when they brought out that replica, by God.
Yeah.
Oz first in line.
Yeah, that young romance, young romance, I think it was. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's I'm digging that stuff.
It's an awesome format, and even Marvel had tried to do that with the magazines that I didn't realize were out. Varian found those someplace inexpensively. They had done at least 6 issues of that, and those magazines were really good, even though they weren't self-contained. But you got a John Byrne Fantastic Four, a John Byrne Hulk, a one of the Jansen era, Miller era Daredevils, and Michelini and Leighton Iron Man. Just cream of the crop in those books. 96 pages plus a cover. So it's 100 pages for like $3.
What a bargain.
What a bargain.
And for such great classic stories too.
Even on reprints, and you and I know, I'm assuming that you're the same age as me. When we were growing up and reading comics, there were Marvel Tales, Marvel Triple Action, Giant Size Triple Action. Yep. There were all of these other reprints out there that we bought and ate up because we wanted to read Marvel. We didn't care. Oh, look, it's a different Avengers team. Oh, it's a younger Avengers team. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And if you think you're going to confuse your audience, just stick a paragraph along the top and explain to them this is a great reprint from 1965, back when the Avengers consisted of, Iron Man, Thor, whatever, and enjoy.
Yeah.
No harm, no foul.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Now, Sarah has a technical question now. Does a comic book script have to be in a set format for the artist, or is there wiggle room?
There is, and again, this is like your business situation. When you're working with other artists, it's whatever, or with other talent working on a comic, it's whatever you're all comfortable with doing. There's no set script, there's no set formula, there's no set way to do it. If you look at the 616 documentary on Disney Plus that's running now, where they talk about the Marvel method, there's all sorts of different ways to get that script out to folks. Most of the time it's like a movie treatment, and then an artist who's capable. Some of them aren't. Some of them like to have a full script with dialogue, and that's cool. I did all the War of the Worlds. We had that done by Horace, who's a great artist out of Germany, and I did full scripts on those. Panel 1, this is the description of the panel, this is the dialogue that's in the panel, because he did all of the lettering on that himself. So everybody works at a different level. Everybody works in a different formula. It's whatever you're comfortable with your artist. That's the amount of scripting that you're doing in order to give them the information.
Exactly.
To get the job done.
Clarity is utmost.
Communication is the key. It's like you're married. So
yeah, without the sex. Well, wait a second. It is like you're married.
And your kid is the book.
Yeah, there we go. You gotta love it. You gotta love it.
That's the way it works.
Now, Teresa Dunn from YouTube has a question here. We've already talked about how Randy got started, but great question here. Who inspired you as a young creator, and who inspires you now?
My uncle, probably, when he gave me that book on Woody Woodpecker, was my initial inspiration. But Barks and Beck, I was a huge fan of. Like I said, if you look at my art style, it's very cartoony, and I'm inspired by everybody on certain periods at certain times. And when growing up, I hated certain artists that the older you get, the more you appreciate them for their positive qualities. And the key to being an artist like this, especially a sequential artist, is to go through and cherry pick what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and to be able to look at it and go, that works. That worked really well. I got to do that. That didn't work very well. It looks kind of goofy. Anybody talks to me, for example, about sound effects, I always tell them Jim Aparo. And you go, Jim Aparo? Never thought about sound effects from Jim Aparo. Go back and look at those. Go back and look at those Brave and the Bolds, because he was doing everything on that book after the script. He'd probably get a full script, and he'd go through and do maybe not the initial balloon lettering, but those sound effects are all him. And you see those letters all smashed together and move and in waves and do all sorts of really interesting things. Love his sound effects and never get tired of looking at work. Also, Aparo, when it comes to inking, was one of those guys like Alex Nino, who could take a brush and lay a little pressure down and lift a little pressure up, and he's got this perfect shadow for like a nose or a face or whatever. He'd work in blobs, and it sounds worse than what it actually is. He was very gifted in his inking technique and style, had a very unique look to his stuff. And the people out there that have a really unique look to their work are the people that really inspire me in whatever direction that they're capable of. You look at C.C. Beck and Alex Toth and the simplicity, the starkness, the use of negative space. There's so much to glean out there. Kirby and his dynamics and his use of basic shapes in order to obtain a dynamic look just by going circle, circle, square, square, circle, circle. He used to, you see his more modern, his later work, and you can really see that broken down, especially if you get a look at any of his pencil work. It's just amazing, the stuff he was doing. Don Heck, even was somebody that I hated growing up, but you start looking at him and you see how he's working almost like a viewmaster in different levels. And even though a lot of his work, his explosions, even some of his sound effects look incredibly flat, it's like he's working on that multi-plane viewmaster, and he's seeing it in his head, pushing this up, pulling that back. It's very fascinating stuff to see and to look at. You can probably pull some sort of lesson out of anybody that they consider to be an accomplished artist or an old workhorse. And the other thing you have to remember is that they were pulling out 22, 25 pages a month, if not double that, depending upon how fast they were working. So a lot of these guys and girls were working off of instinct. Yeah. And it's just really fascinating to consider that and look these folks over.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and Mike Sikowski was one for me. I grew up on his Justice League, and I thought this is just this side of tolerable. But the more I read of him, like when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, I'm thinking this is pretty flat. Of course, he wasn't getting exactly what I'd call the greatest inkers either. But towards the 70s, when he's finally getting somebody good like Dick Giordano on him, and I'm like, this is really quite good. He's really a good storyteller, So
he always was. It's just, again, he was working off of instinct. And like you said, sometimes he had a really bad inker. But everybody out there has got their positives and their negatives. I mean, you can even look at Vinnie Coletta's inking, who I consider to be undeniably one of the worst in the business. And you can still pull some sort of value out of his crow-quill work and his scratchiness. You go back and you look at his romance books and you go, wow, why did you stop doing this? It's because he needed the money. He was able to kick out a quick page inking real fast, and that's what he did. Here you go.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cogs in a great machine.
That's exactly right. And these are guys also that weren't getting hospitalization plans, exclusive deals, royalties. These are guys that are getting paid by the page. They produce, they get paid. And that's the way it worked back then.
Just to put food on the table.
Yeah, exactly. That was Kirby's whole thing, was feeding his family. In fact, I remember you mentioned Vinnie Coletta. I read that book from Tomorrow's on him. And when Kirby asked that Coletta be pulled off of his Fourth World stuff for DC, he made sure that Coletta had work to make up for it.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to see the guy lose money off of him, but he certainly wasn't going to have him make money off of his books. Now Sarah would like to know how. I'm sorry, go ahead, Randy.
Coletta was kind of the go-to guy. If you needed a book done in a weekend, he could do it.
It's true. And I also learned that he was also the guy that some editors used to hold over people's heads, like Mike Grell.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I
can see that.
Yeah, it's like, well, you start making your deadlines and we'll get Bob Smith to ink you and not Vinnie Coletta. So, Sarah says, asks, how important is it to go to Comic Cons for an unknown comic creator?
Well, right now and probably for the next year, you're probably, we'll be lucky if we have Comic Cons. But doing cons really is another way of your marketing. So networking. It's to go out there and push your brand, to show off your work, to talk to other people and see what they're doing, and to glean ideas from them as far as what works for them, what doesn't. Just like comic artists are looking at other people's comic work, you want to analyze people's marketing strategies too, because there's some great books out there that are horribly undermarketed, that don't make the money that they deserve, and a lot of books out there that are horribly overmarketed that make a lot more money than they deserve. And it's up to you to figure out which ones of those are which, and what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and apply that to your work.
Exactly. Now, we've been throwing around some jargon here every now and then. And we sometimes need to remember, Sarah would like to know, what is sequential art versus just art?
Well,
it's a good question. It's a very good question.
It is. It is. Sequential art is art in sequence that tells a story. That you're panel to panel to panel to panel. When you do a cover, You're doing art. When you're doing storytelling, if you do an 8-page story, you are doing art, but you're doing it sequentially. So you are doing sequential art.
Right. It was a term coined by, I believe, Will Eisner.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was.
Blackhawks and the Spirit and all. Our chief inquisitor, Cindy Koepp, CKOEPP.com. Sign up for her newsletter quickly. Do you have a favorite comic character, Randy?
I have characters in certain eras done by certain talents that I love, that I thoroughly enjoy. C.C. Beck's Captain Marvel, Jack Cole's Plastic Man, Carl Barks' Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge tales. Especially those quickly come to mind. All of the EC stuff, but that's not a comic character. When it comes to a specific character, I always lean towards the oddball ones, the ones that nobody knows. The last pitch I made at Marvel, a serious pitch that I made to Marvel, the editor the character was under at the time, actually looked me straight in the eye and said, "Do we really own this character?" And I said, "I'm probably done pitching any ideas, at least to you."
Yeah.
So and when they do that, when they don't know their own properties, it's like that's when you throw your hands up and you go, "Comics are in trouble. Mainstream's in trouble." Yeah. Because if you're hired to do a job, you should know your job.
Yeah, exactly. Sarah would like to know, what is the most common mistake you notice that new comic book creators make?
Not enough experience, not enough practical knowledge as to what they're doing. And a lot of their mistakes turn out to be bonehead mistakes that are very simply, oh, hi, Joe. I hope you're not, dragging you away from Indie Volt. Hope Variant's still on the air. Oh, no. Anyway.
How could he be? I have you now.
There we go. There are nothing matches you, and you can't, in my opinion, you can't do too much research. You can overthink things very easily as far as where the market goes and your art, especially sequential art. I know a lot of artists that get bound up. I think we were talking about Dave Cockrum on one of the other shows the other day. I think one of the main reasons he was missing deadlines was because he kept thinking about composition. Is this going to work? Is this, I'm going to move it to here. Is this going to move there? That going to move there. But if you go back and you look, for example, at Jack Cole's Plastic Man, which Art Spiegelman has done a couple of beautiful articles and a book on that, and he shows how Cole had it down to an instinct, and he used Plastic Man to move your eye all the way across the page. And Eisner has done a couple of really good textbooks on comics and sequential art and the art of graphic storytelling, I believe they're called, where he breaks down spirit section stories that he did, 7-page stories, which are bigger and have more depth and detail in them than a lot of 6-issue stories that you see from a lot of the current mainstream companies, and how he did that. I did this panel in order to do this. I put the character in this position in order to move him there. And hopefully, eventually it turns out to be an instinct. But research. And anything that you do, you have to know the market. You have to know how to do the market as well as you possibly can. You're always going to make mistakes. And I had this discussion earlier with a professor friend of mine, where we were talking about the importance of a college paper. If you can get a degree in sequential art at a college, if that's as good as doing 4 years of actual comic book work. And in my opinion, it doesn't match it, because nothing teaches you faster than the school of hard knocks. So don't let that keep you from getting out there and think that, oh, I haven't done enough research, I need to stop and not do this. Do it in as simple a form as you have to. Mini comics, do it in a print-on-demand book that has a small print run, whatever you have to do, but do something, get it out there so that you can get that feedback, because that's important, because it not only gives you that skin, but you learn from your mistakes. You learn from what you haven't done right. Dave Simm, creator of Cerebus, has a great line where he says everybody's got 2,000 really awful, god-awful pages in them that they do right off the bat. And then at your 2001st, you're almost competent. So, and you almost start getting the idea that you know what you're doing. So you need to get out there and cover that ground and do that 2000.
Exactly. Now, Cindy Koepp, who is in the process of writing her very first graphic novel, Yeah, she's doing a good job of it too. For someone just starting the comic book writing phenomena, do you have a favorite resource to recommend? You've already talked about the the
The
Will Eisner books.
the Eisner books are awesome because they're set up like textbooks, and I still have them. I still refer to them every couple of years or so, and I still glean information off of them that I didn't know. Good evening, Willow. That other than that, as far as how-to books go, my firm deep recommendation to you is never take just one book. The Eisner book is awesome. Absolutely. I love it. Do get that in your library. Don't lean on it as your only source of information. Go out there and find other books. Find books on comic writing, on sequential artwork, on composition, on inking, on every aspect of this business, depending upon what you're working in, and do it. Writing a book, you've already got some experiences. I'm assuming that you've already done a number of prose novels, so you've got a basic experience on story structure. It's awesome. You know, I've got 3 or 4 years worth of Writers Digest and Writers Monthly magazines that I still keep and look back through and still pull things out of. You can pull your inspiration and those sources from anywhere and apply them to the market. And in fact, I think you're going to be a better creator by going out and getting some of those outside sources and bringing them into comics and from your own personal perspective and viewpoint, whether it's cultural or situational or whatever, because comics need the variety. Comics desperately needs the variety. So go out there and find extra sources. Dig out, maybe the genre that you're into. You want to write a comic book, but all of the genres in comics right now are not the genre that you're writing. Get to know that genre real well and translate it into comics. Kick that book out. Mm-hmm. Let's see how it does. There's no harm in it.
Exactly.
You got to do it, and you never know because you've seen. I was talking to Brian, I believe, earlier. Most of the phenomenons that you have out there in comics, especially in this art form, come out of accidents. I didn't expect the book to sell like that. Suddenly we're back in a fourth printing. Yeah. And it comes from somebody taking a chance, and the large mainstream companies right now are so scared to take any type of chance. It's ridiculous, especially when it comes to format, to look, to genre, to any of the aspects. There's enough of us out here now, enough creatives out here that we can reinvent this wheel real easy, and we need to do it real bad and real fast. And it's not in digital. It's not going to be in a YA market unless you have a large powerhouse like Scholastic that can bump you into the box stores and hide their numbers. But that's a whole other story. But there's room out there, and there's a need for an entrepreneur. And yeah, some of us are going to stumble. Some of us are going to only kick around for maybe 10 years or so, and suddenly go out there and start going out there and looking in other directions to do other things. But there's so many places out there that you just have to be inventive enough to tap into it, figure out how to make you money, and do it. Get it to make money and just kick it out there, because you don't know. Those dollar stores are always looking for stuff to sell. Who knows what? I'm sure there are markets out there I have not remotely thought of that are accessible. Mm-hmm. They just have to be tapped. That's all. Yeah. And it needs the creative people out there to go out there and do it.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned,
Randy, the big amount of Christian bookstores that have comics in them.
Yeah.
There's Jason Moore started inking for a comic company that goes strictly to this was quite a few years ago, that goes strictly to the religious shops.
And I've been seeing one that can't remember his name, but he used to draw. He drew Fantastic Four and some Marvel books. I want to say Salvador LaRocca. LaRocca. He's doing some adaptations of the Bible itself. Mm-hmm. That I'm seeing not just in religious stores, but I'm seeing in Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
So
Jason got to ink, I believe, the Book of Revelation over Kyle Holtz.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah, and I says, well, you're in for a treat. There's a lot of really good monsters there for you to deal with.
No joke.
That was ideal for Kyle's type, shadowy style. So.
Yeah. Oh my God! Yeah. This is the guy that used to draw Carnage, to give you an idea. So but real briefly, you mentioned, Randy, like getting inspiration as a writer. I get a lot of my inspiration from artists. Mm-hmm. Like we were talking before the show about Jim Shooter's blog that he had for a while. Yeah. Jim Shooter being a former editor in chief at Marvel.
Yeah.
And he did like a 3 or 4 part thing, an examination of Jack Kirby's art in just one short Human Torch story, and broke it down. And that it was a literal lesson on how to tell a story, which as a writer, if we can communicate that to an artist, and get them to do the things like Randy was saying, get the person to use the art like Jack Cole did to force the eye to move across the page in the proper sequence. So, so there's all kinds of inspiration out there. Also, the John Buscema Stan Lee, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
That's got a few nice points in it, but again, that's not the kind of in my mind, that's not the kind of sit down book that you're going to glean a lot of information from. It's got some instructional on basic dynamics.
Yeah.
Especially how Marvel looks at dynamics and how to properly, for example, look at somebody punching somebody. But we just discussed this on I think it was last Sunday's show, where we were talking about how there's this classic page that Kirby did of Captain America fighting Batroc. And he goes all the way in 9 panels. He goes all the way from the start of the battle to the end of the battle in 9 pages.
Yeah.
And it starts with Batroc pulling his leg back and getting ready to kick. And then through the other 8 panels is a huge fight.
Yeah.
Cap takes some damage. Batroc takes some damage. Finally, Batroc takes a lot of damage. And then the last panel is an overhead shot that has Batroc on all fours looking totally defeated with Captain America standing over him like, okay, buddy, have you had enough? Without any dialogue. It's all just boom, 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 boom. Yeah. And it's just amazing. And it's
you talk about.
And that's the idea of dynamics that you find that how to draw the Marvel Way. The Marvel Way points out some nice equipment in the front but the basic thing about dynamics, but it really doesn't get into like the sequential art meat and potatoes like the Eisner book does.
That's true.
DC also kicked out a whole set of books, and I'm not sure if they're even still in print, where they went out.
They're tough to find and they're expensive.
You know the ones that I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Where they had Denny O'Neil do a book on writing. That
beautiful.
Was,
yeah. Great book. But no, what I got from the Marvel book was how to write characters in the quiet moments.
Okay.
Because there's that one page where Buscema showed like these businessmen, normal humans, just standing around being talking heads. But then Buscema showed how he would like switch the angle, use body language, just not just stand with their hands at their sides, but actually gesticulating and expressions. And, that's what I learned, because you're going to have exposition. You can't have people punching each other all the time. Believe it or not, at least I don't think so. But, you're going to have quieter moments in a comic, and he showed me how to write them by looking at the example he used, for a static page versus one that had some life to it. So, like what you're saying about getting other sources.
Yeah, I haven't read that book in a long time. I probably need to dig it back up. So
I saw it at 5 Below.
Yeah, 5 and Below had copies of it. I'm not sure if they were edited or not, but they had copies there for $5. Yeah.
Yeah. I keep trying to talk myself into getting like 4 or 5 extra copies just in case and just tearing them up. Cindy Cap would like to know, what is your biggest pet peeve in comics?
I think we already covered that. There's a lot of irritating people out there who don't know better and who need to know.
There we go. Yeah. Now, our friend Joe D. McPhee asks, if you could write any existing comic IP, what would it be?
If it is already out there, I don't know. I really don't. I'd probably want to. I almost got close to creating a superhero team. Well, I can't really even say that because Shrek told me that it would never come out as a joke. I wouldn't mind doing Batman and the Outsiders, but I wouldn't do Batman and the Outsiders. I'd do Man-Bat and the Outsiders. If I had to do something for DC, I would love to do that. I had a whole team I wrote up. It's a whole nother story that we probably will take too long to tell now. But I took Mike Carlin off really good in his offices for a while. But
good man.
That's what I hear. Shrek liked it a lot. So and for Marvel, I'm not sure what I would write of an existing title. I really honestly would love to do if it was under better conditions. I wouldn't mind taking over Captain Marvel, the current Captain Marvel, for a while, because I think I could write that character with a little research really well. I've got I think I know enough, not that she's got a big lexicon of of particular traits, but I think that character could be a very well done, very interesting character if it was done well. You know, and be a masthead central character for Marvel like they want it to be. They look at in my opinion, that character should be an old workhorse, almost the equivalent of experience to Captain America. And they have her so milk toasted around where she's looking for her heritage, or she's looking for her backstory, or just looking to look or whatever, that it's not what that character needs to do.
No.
You know, that character needs to kick some ass is what that character needs to do, and take charge. And she could be, and she's not, but that's me. I feel the same way about Storm. I think Storm should have gotten her own title the same time Wolverine got his own title, and that character should have been right up there. She was one of my favorite X-Men. I love that the idea of the thief, and then discovering that you had control of the weather. That's a very fascinating character. DC, if I were to do a single character that they would let me do, though they never would, I'd want to reboot Paul Kirk Manhunter, because that's one of my very favorite stories. And back when I was catching that book at Ollie's, that collection for $1.99, I was buying them all out and handing them out to people, going, "Have you read this? This book is awesome." Just yes, it's dated. It's got a lot of 70s kung fu references, and the guy throws, throwing stars, and he's got a sensei that he learns martial arts from, and very 70s, master of kung fu type stuff. But overall, the idea behind that character, and that I still reread that very often. You go back and you read that everything that Goodwin had intended for that character is in that last detective story when he runs across Batman, and they start pushing the differences between the two of them, and the fact that he's out there literally killing himself over and over and over again. That to me would make for an incredibly interesting character over a period of time. And it was a fun, rousing story. And Goodwin and Simonson told 7-page stories, just like those old Spirit sections, where they told a really tight, very compact story, just 7 pages, boom, 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 boom. And sometimes he was doing 16 panels on a page, which is crazy. But each of those stories were just gems, just incredible.
They were. Those were Archie, and they're early stuff. Like Simonson, some of his first pro work.
It's very first pro work.
Yeah,
I believe. Yeah, he went right. What did he go right from there over to? I think he did Battlestar Galactica one shot for Marvel, I think. After but a very unique style back then. Well, he still has a very unique look to his work. So,
he just doesn't do enough of it for my taste.
No.
And me, if you talk about, I think I may have mentioned it before. I want to do the Spectre, but I want to do it in the style of Sandman Mystery Theater.
Noir. That would be real. That would be really eerie, very fascinating. I've always been attracted to Phantom Stranger too.
Oh yeah,
I'd love to do that strip, and why that's not a TV series escapes the hell out of me. So it's like they have him pop into Swamp Thing, and he's an old guy, and I'm like, no, that's not Phantom Stranger, dude. You just need to have him. He should always be the same age, look the same, just walk in, change one little thing, disappear. Yeah. Whether it's a whisper in somebody's ear, or a pointing of somebody, or going in and just pulling somebody out of the fire or whatever right at the right time, and just come and gone. What happened? Yeah. Oh, some stranger just come by and did this.
Yeah. And the less you know about them, the better you like them.
Yep. Why that's not a regular TV show, I couldn't tell you. Same thing with Manhunter, though. Manhunter would make an incredible TV show.
It really would.
Sandman Mystery Theater would also make an incredible TV show.
Yes, it would. That was a great book. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Sarah would like to know, what is the most, important piece of advice that you would give to a brand new comic book creator? If you could just tell them one thing to get them through, other than educate yourself. You have said that, but is there one other thing that you would tell a new creator?
The next thing would be is to not worry about what you're doing and do it. Just do it. And you need to get that first book out there. That's the big thing. You need to get that book out there, and it has to be a book. It can't be digital. It can't be a web comic. It has to be a book, because there's nothing in. And I bet you'll back me up on this. Nothing matches having that first book in your hand, open it up, looking through it, and going, I did this. And when you smell that ink, no matter how badly or how well it's printed, you're always going to remember that smell for the rest of your life. And that's when you decide, once you inhale that ink and it gets into your blood, that's when you decide whether you're going to do this for the rest of your life. And you can fight it. And I have personal experience. You can fight it, you can get away from it, you can go out and do something else, but it's not going to get out of your system. You might as well just decide, I need to stay in this market, be in this market, figure out how to make it work for me, and make it work. No matter how you have to do it. I do advertising, I do sequential work. I've been really lucky to stumble across a couple of really great clients and some great jobs that I get all the time. But I can't wait right now to do a crowdfunding book. I can't wait. Yeah. But I've done my research, and I know that book has to be done before I do the crowdfunding book. So I'm working on a book now, and I've had a commercial job that's tied up my last 2 weeks. I'm biting at the bit. Tomorrow, I'm back drawing monkeys, and I'm going to love it, and I can't wait to get back to it. I desperately have a book that I'm in the middle of that I know where it's going. I've got a story I want to tell, some points I need to make, and I'm going to go out and do it. But I know I'm not going to go out and try to crowdfund this thing until that book is done or almost done, so that I can concentrate on my marketing, because that's what I need to do when that book is out and crowdfunding. Then I want to be everywhere.
Yeah, crowdfunding is virtually a second job, pretty much, and it's emotional too.
Yes.
So, and which is funny, because you predicted Cindy Kep's current project. Now, I happen to know what it is, and it has a wonderful title that my naughty-minded Nevermorians will appreciate.
I haven't officially announced it yet.
Oh, okay. I thought you had.
No, everybody knows about it. All of the professionals. I can't keep my mouth shut for nothing. You know that. Here we are. We're almost hitting that 2-hour mark. And
I told you.
We're still talking. We're
still talking, man. We're still having fun.
I am doing a book off of my experiences and my perspective of the comic market and the direct market. And it's told to the eyes of an angry little monkey that I've drawn before. His name is Spank. He's got a brain dead cousin whose name's Shock, who's got frizzed out hair, and he's got a tag on his ear. And he's most of the time he does stupid things. They've got a friend who's a fried chicken named Choke. They've got a buddy named a drooling donkey character named Buck, and a dolphin character named Flog, and another bunny character who's going to be into cosplaying named Bop. That they go through and they cover comics history through the direct market, and it's turning out to be a lot deeper project than what I was expecting when I first started. But I'm on page 36, for example. Right now I'm on page 36, and I'm just worked my way up to Simon and Kirby. Nice. And Captain America 1. And I'm right now I'm skipping like a stone over so much stuff. I don't want to mention that. I do want to mention this because this is important. Comes back to here, but it talks about the way the market was, the way the characters were, why the characters were important at individual times, why there are certain fads that hit and didn't hit, why things happened the way that they did, and how we ended up in the mess that we are now, and and hopefully, knock on wood, it'll cover all of that. And it's going to take a while. It might even be another year before it's all done. I hope I can get it done, because then after that, I've got a bucket list of stuff that keeps climbing that I desperately want to do. I want to do a collection of tales from the Aniverse and add a bunch of new material, finish off a bunch of stories. It'll be the Aniverse Omnibus. And it'll be a thick book, but might not have absolutely everything in it, but it'll be as close as possible, because I've got the okay from Sue to do reprints and collections on that, and then split the money with her once we hit a certain amount. dollar amount, which I hope we more than surpass. After that, I've got 2 superhero projects I've desperately wanted to do. One of them was printed by a small company up in Canada that got absolutely no exposure whatsoever. Another one I pitched to Kamiko way back when, and silly, stupid me. And this is how bad you can not burn bridges, but miss horrible opportunities. I sent it to Kamiko, the proposal, and I got back a handwritten letter from their art director at the time telling me how great the property was. But if I were to want to take it and switch it around, because he thought the opening was too slow, because I told everything in chronological order. Right. If I wanted to start out in the middle of the action and then go back and explain in flashbacks what happened and then go forward, they would probably take it.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm not going to do that because I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it all I want to do it all in chronological order. Mm-hmm. And that's the last communication I think I ever had with Matt Wagner.
Oh,
anyway,
yeah. What does Matt Wagner know about storytelling? That hack.
And that, yeah, exactly. What does Matt Wagner know about storytelling? At the time, he was doing this little book named Grendel and starting this other book called Mage. And he didn't. Yeah. But yeah, stupid me. But I still got that handwritten letter to remind myself everybody makes stupid moves. Everybody makes bad mistakes. I've burned more than my share of bridges, Axel Alonso, in my time. That that some I regret, some I don't regret, some I kind of go, yeah, I did that, but I very quickly learned that I'm the best boss of me, so I know exactly who to blame if something goes bad. So that's the way that works. That's why I've been in alternative and independent publishing for as long as I haven't done my own stuff. I get along with me pretty well.
And I found working for myself, my boss is still an idiot.
Well, I didn't say my boss wasn't an idiot. I said I get along with him.
That's good. That's good to get along. Yeah. Sarah has another great question here. How important is it to have digital copies along with physical copies, and how do you get a hold of a printing press?
There are plenty of printing presses out there. There's a lot of print on demand places that you can get a hold of. All you have to do your research and look around. Look locally first, because you want to be able to go over and visit that printer if you can. Mm-hmm. And a quick visit to the printer also opens you up as to what their capabilities are and are not. And every printer, a lot of printers are very different. One printer is going to be in your neighborhood, is going to be completely different from the next printer. And one thing I quickly found out, the one local guy that I was running with was actually getting paper from the bigger guy that was 20 minutes away from me. And the bigger guy had better prices because he's the guy who got the paper first. So, hey, I guess I'm going with the bigger guy. Yeah. And that bigger guy, I had the same, we had 2 different printers when we did the paper. Yeah. And the guy that we stuck with the longest literally turned the job around 24 hours.
Wow.
Because there was no fancy cover, there was no staple in the paper. It was just folded. So he told me it kept the third shift guys awake. So they would set up the job, and third shift guys would read it as it was going off the press. I was printing 10,000, so it was probably an hour job maybe. Once everything was set up and just run it, big web press, fold it down, put it on a pallet and ship it. But definitely get to know your printer. Get to visit a couple of printers, get to know the process and understand it. And then I think there are probably a book or 2, or especially online, because you've got the greatest library right there on the computer screen to go out and glean all of this information. You don't even have to leave your house, and just go through it and look and see what other people are doing and other formats that they're using. Listening to podcasts is also really, really important to glean that information from too. Now, when it comes to digital copies, I am not a believer in very much digital. I'm a very old-fashioned physical guy. And I think that the digital market is out there and is incredibly small, and it's mostly used by people who don't have a whole lot of money. So that market to me is not very important. But when I do my book and I want to sell it overseas, I'm definitely going to offer a digital copy, because that is the quickest and easiest method to deliver to somebody across the pond. Yeah. Locally, though, I don't know. I don't know if I would offer a digital copy to anybody. And to me, I still get a check from Caliber for War of the Worlds that sells copies of War of the Worlds digitally on all of the different digital comic platforms. That's great. That's fine. But that's not my main source of income. It's just a little. It might be a McDonald's trip once a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
You can't depend, and again, you're dealing with these platforms, which we covered already. Can't depend on these people to give you a constant, steady flow of income. Yeah. So unless you find, and there might be, who knows, tomorrow it could just spring up out of nowhere, a digital platform that's pulling in money, making money, and selling independent comics in a novel, ingenious, hardcore money-making way, then go with those people. But don't depend on them, because as soon as they realize somebody's making too much money, they're going to move that goalpost again. Yeah. And that's the way it's always going to work. I don't trust digital. I don't. I mean, I send proof copies. I've got proof copies that people send me to read and look over, but I don't buy digital, because that's not, as a personal choice, it's not something I want to do. I want to buy a comic that I can collect. I want to have stacks of long boxes here in the basement. I even love the boxes and boxes and crates of boxes that mostly are behind this curtain, that of stuff that I've done over the last 20, 30 years that I've got multiple copies of. You know, I go up on eBay and I see somebody offering an outrageous price for one of the Aniverse books, and I go, dude, you want a case of them? If you think if you can move them for that price, I'd sell them to you for half of that, easy, you know, and make a lot of money. But digital, tomorrow there could be a different format. You know, I hope that there is. I hope that there's all sorts of oddball, crazy formats out there. I've been wanting to do a video for the longest time, showing off everything from Bazooka Joe bubblegum wrappers to Chick publications to mini comics to ash cans to comic floppies, as they call it, to larger square bound prestige format books, to treasury size books, to I got a Tintin book back here that's in hardcover that's got to be 3 by 2 at least.
Yeah.
It is big.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Comics can come in all sorts of shapes and all sorts of sizes. I just had a collection of Garth strips that we were showing off on Sunday. That's in the Garfield format. Mm-hmm. Garth is an old strip from England about a guy who travels through time. Garth. A lot of that work was done by Frank Bellamy, and we got to talk. Glenn Fleming was on, so we were talking a lot about Frank Bellamy. The formats out there are tremendous. And remember, since you're not dealing with the same old, it's time to start thinking about the new, about getting out of that square box, away from that standard bag, out from behind the standard board, not worried about whether you're going to be slabbed and have a number on it and never be able to open that particular book ever again. It's time to stop worrying about that and worry about getting into people's hands who want to read your product.
Exactly.
That's my deep opinion.
I agree.
In any way, shape, or form. Look at the puzzle books that are out there. All the different, you go out to a dollar store and you see all these different types of puzzle books, everything from big little book size, big little books, kids, look it up. Anyway, big little book size to digest size to big wampum size to huge, thick books. Comics ought to be exactly like that and available everywhere. And if Marvel, especially DC, if Marvel and DC were on the ball, they'd be moving that stuff in black and white like crazy. And they don't. But that's not me. So.
Exactly. Well, we're coming up on 2 hours. I told you, Randy. I
told you. We can just jabber away all day.
We could. And we won't get to everyone's comments tonight. But,
sorry, folks.
But we've had some great questions. And I know Randy has got responsibilities at Indie Volt too. So
Varian says he's got it covered. I believe him.
You trust him? I mean, come on.
It's his platform. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. I keep forgetting.
If it was my platform, I'd be sweating bullets right now. But that's all.
Let's take a couple more questions. Why don't we, Randy? If you're willing, Sarah.
Whatever you want to do.
Oh, don't say that. We could be here all night. Sarah asks, for a first-time comic book creator, how many copies of comics would you suggest printing?
Well, that's a really good question because again, the market has shifted so much and the capabilities have shifted so much that I would say the answer to that is, and it's liquid again, whatever you can comfortably afford to print. You don't want to print. If you print a couple thousand, you'll get a great discount on your per unit cost, but you'll have, like me, cases and cases of a book sitting back here. Or there are some publishers out there now that print on demand 25 copies every time they have a show and not worry about it. They have a copy on file. I did a book a couple of years back. That's a Lindy Jacks collection. That's a collection of short stories using a character. Got a little elf character, likes to go around, collect things, and trade for stuff. That's what he is. And I had that printed on demand. Had 100 copies done because I could, and take them around to shows until they're gone. And they've got that on file. I can call the print on demand guy and order another, whatever, 5 to 50 to 1 even, if I want to pay for the setup fee, as many as I need. We're in an age now with the print on demand guys. If you know your print on demand printer, you should go visit them too if you can. We have one that's in Plymouth. That's Comics Wellspring. That's about 45 minutes from my house. So I had it printed. I went down there and dropped him off the files, and he said, "Well, we have a 2-week turnaround time." I dropped off the files and I dropped him off a check. On Monday, he called me on Thursday and said, "Hey, your book's done." I said, "Thanks for that 2-week turnaround time. That was awesome. Appreciate that deeply." He said, "Well, you paid us. We had the time. We put it on there and it looked good. We ran it." So
nice.
You never know. But having that communication with that printer again is very important. But you should definitely print as many as you can afford. Try not to run up.
Yeah.
And try not to get a huge amount of overstock. Now for the paper, the Flint Comics paper, we printed 10,000 on that constantly. And I was always trying to get it bumped up to 12.5 just to do it, and never did. But that's because 10,000 was a comfortable number, even on the months where we sold out. That it was still a comfortable number, and there's a price break right there at that 10,000. So
very cool.
That's cool. How that worked.
Very nice. Sarah would like to know, how big of a team do you have to have creating a comic, and are there contracts for each separately?
Sarah, should always have paper when you're dealing with business. You should always have paper between you, even if it's just a piece of notebook paper that the two of you signed. That way, at least you have the comfort of knowing you have something on paper. That's an agreement between the two of you that you'll be able to stick to and might or might not hold up in court. Half the time, I have no idea what to charge. Oh, we can get back to that. But how big of a team you should have is how big you need to get the book done. And that's the whole key. Is we are in, again, the Wild West age of crowdfunding, where you're not having to make a monthly schedule. You can have one person on that book and the same person doing the networking, and the marketing on it if you want. You can have an artist on there if you don't want to do the art that you need to pay. You should always get some sort of a page rate and maybe a back end royalty on the product, especially if the guy is primo and professional. Yeah. Those agreements are all entirely up to your art team or up to your team and yourself. But again, you need to always get those terms on paper. And whether even if you get a letter in, just a quick note, I agree to letter issue whatever issue number, 24 pages at such and such a rate, and have the two of you sign it. Boom.
Yeah.
That way you're safe and secure. Paper never hurts. Yeah. Gentlemen's agreements. Hey, buddy, want to do this? Will usually run down a bad path unless you're really, really tight with that person. Mm-hmm. So, and even if you are tight, a lot of times that friendship can crumble in a heartbeat if you don't have your butt covered. So always have paper. That's
true. Or if nothing, or at the very least, send somebody an email with the terms, and if they go, "Oh, okay, I agree," that may be as close to a real contract as many.
That's still paper. Still paper. Even if it's electronic. Yeah.
It's reproducible.
I'm still talking physical again. I have a file. I have a couple file cabinets back here. I have a file that's literally 4.5, maybe 5 inches thick with contracts.
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of paper from the 80s myself when I was doing mini comics and everything. So, but you pointed this out from Meredith Loughran. It is a good thing to know. Half the time, I have no idea what to charge for talent. Excuse me, charge for talent or what to pay for talent. And Sarah agrees, saying good information. I haven't got a clue. Working on learning as much as possible.
And again, there's no concrete rule.
Yeah.
You can't walk up to a guy and say, well, standard rate's $5 a page. That doesn't work because everybody's got a different level. Everybody's got a different skill level, and everybody wants to be paid to their skill level. The art team or the team is going to charge you as much as they think they can get away with. What I usually do is I ask them if they have a budget. And if I can work within that budget, then that's good for me. And I've had jobs that have paid, like I said, I've had jobs where I've charged like a lawyer by the hour. And I said, well, my going rate is, say as an example, and I'm not saying this is what I told them, but as an example, I charge $75 an hour and have them go, yeah, okay. Or they'll go, really? Because we were expecting like 75 for the whole job, and that'll also be a big indicator of how easy or hard they are going to be to deal with if they can't meet your price or if you can't meet their price. Because there's the nothing works better than to go, nice to know. I'll get back to you when I get rich.
Right. Exactly.
And there's always other people out there willing to work. And if they're, if you just, all you have to do is look around for them,
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Now, Teresa Dunn says she's thinking of starting possibly writing and illustrating her own comic. How would I get started? And should I collaborate with someone who knows comics?
Well, Teresa, get to know comics. Yeah. That'd be my very first recommendation. Don't get into it because you think it looks cool. Figure out why it looks cool. Figure out what the nuts and bolts are to doing it, and get a little experience under your belt. Don't ever be afraid to start with a short story. Start small. I believe Meredith is working on the right way, doing small steps, starting with a short story before she works up to something larger. Everybody, if they're into comics, everybody has the big mega epic, huge mega epic that's going to run hundreds of issues and get it done. And you always see these guys always try to start. You might be able to. This is why the independent and alternative sometimes only have one issue of a property get out, because they get one out and they realize how hard it is, and holy crap, I really need to learn this business before I do my big mega epic. Yeah. Start small. Baby steps are so important, and it took me a while to learn and understand that myself. But short stories are great. Anthologies are awesome. Working your way up into splitting a book, learning how to delegate jobs out to different authorities, understanding that, hey, I tried lettering. I suck at lettering. We need to find a letterer. Or, hey, coloring, I can get past flats, but all of a sudden the whole day is gone on one page. I need a colorist. That's how you're going to learn, though, is by doing that experience and getting out there to do it. How many people do you need, or how many people should you collaborate with? Again, as many as you need to get the job done as soon as you can, or to cover the job as professionally as you think you can get it done. And how do you get started? You just jump in and you start looking around. You get educations like this. You watch some podcasts. You start experiencing what other people do. You read a lot of comics, a lot of oddball comics. Go out there and find the comics on the genres that you hate, that are well acclaimed, and figure out why that works. Don't be afraid to play around in the field. So again, just like with any type of trade or skill, you have to know the rules before you can go out there and start bending and breaking. So get to know comics. Know why you're here too, because there's so many. Somebody was asking about my pet peeves earlier. There's a lot of people now that are getting into comics in the hopes that they can get a TV writing gig with Netflix. And the two problems with that is, one, you're writing comics. You're not writing for TV. And for two, Netflix really doesn't pay that much. No. Once you actually get into it and you realize what the deal is, it's nice and glamorous for a minute if you have something on the screen, just like holding that book in your hand. But once that flash is gone, then you have to live on what Netflix money you've negotiated for. And believe me, it's not very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. The guys and gals who are getting like the $7 and $8 and $10 or 10-digit figures are people who write TV or write movies.
And not just that, but the guys that are the people that are getting the really, really big deals, not the ones that just luckily land on a, let's say like a Sci-Fi Channel show or whatever, are the guys that have already gone out there and they've pounded out 30, 40, 50, 100 comics themselves. Millerverse is a big example of that.
Yeah.
Tons and tons and tons and tons of work. That so that they know more than know what they're doing. Look at Neil Gaiman, another big example. A lot of comic work, a lot of prose work, then little TV work.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything's a learning. Everything's baby steps.
Exactly, and you can find anthologies right now. Like Meredith, for instance, got her first 2 pages in trade paperback for Luke Stone's. Hybrids, the Sons of Gods, and a lot of pros that we know, Randy, that we grew up with, got their start in like the old House of Mystery, House of Secrets, Chamber of Chills.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have an idea that somebody here is going to be editing an anthology here real quick. So.
I hear tales of that sort of thing too. I always like to keep my ear to the ground. Sarah asks, what are good branding ideas for a new comic book creator in your experience? And he'll probably say stay away from fezzes and sideburns, but
I can't give you a branding idea. Get to know what branding is, and you'll have to stumble around on your own for what works for you. Really, I can't tell you, what's really a good branding idea, if you, and again, we're coming out of like I said before, 30 years or so of Beavis and Butthead stagnation. So anything that appeals to the masculine misogynist in most red-blooded males right now is probably a really good branding idea. But is that going to work next week? Is that going to work next year? Maybe not. Do you want to do that? No, maybe not. If you want to be known as that kind of a person working in that kind of an environment, this market is mutating and changing, and the more it mutates and change, that's your branding idea. That's making that change, and let's hope you find a good one.
Yeah, and be aware of your audience, because I think remember the comic Blonde Avenger. Do you remember reading that?
Yes.
Cynthia Johns. I talked with her, towards the end of her career, and it started out as basically erotica, and she wore a costume which was very revealing, just like her character. But I talked to her at one point at one of the old Chicago cons and at in Detroit, the Motor City Con, and she talked about how she grew to hate it.
Yeah,
that she wanted to tell more mainstream stories and stuff that didn't portray her as a sexual object.
Sure.
But the fans expected to see all the parts of her very generous form falling out of her costume. And eventually she left and goes, I think part of it was she, aside from the recession of the 90s, in comics, the idea that it's really tough to try to correct your course.
Yeah.
Depending on how your branding goes.
Once you're stuck in that brand, it's next to impossible. Well, look at for example, what Dynamite tried to do with Vampirella and how successful that was.
Yeah, exactly.
Right on their face.
Exactly.
And now she's back to the red bathing suit that she always was. So
as well she should be. Sarah would like to know, is it better to co-create with someone with someone who has a fan base, or to go it alone? Or does it matter in your opinion, really?
It matters, because again, it's like a marriage. Like we said earlier, if you get along with that person, then that's great. If you don't get along with that person, then that's going to be a lot of trouble. And even if you do start out getting along with that person, Tales from the Aniverse for me is a big example. I got into that with Susan Van Camp right at the start, and by the second issue, we were already grinding each other's gears real hard about what was acceptable, what was good, what was not good, what should be in the book, what should not be in the book. And we were constantly fussing with that for 6 issues. It got to the point where I was doing pages on my own. She was doing pages on her own. And every once in a while, if we didn't want to do one or two jobs on whatever story, we had the other person do that just so that they could, so that they could do it. So it looked like we were collaborating on something. Mm-hmm. But though we created just about all the characters together, out of some living room talks with groups of people. But it gets rough when you're collaborating with people if you can't get along with them, or if you don't have the same singular vision. Because at the time, I was more into whimsy stuff. She was into more realistic things. I wanted to black box as many things as possible. How does that starship work? Don't have to know. It just moves. It just goes. But everything else had to make more sense to Susan back then. Now I'm probably more like Sue than she was back then. So, but that's just how things change. It's rough working with a person. Sometimes I would suggest trying a combination of both, Sarah, getting out there and trying to do some of your own stuff just so you can taste what the other jobs look like, and so that for sure what you do or do not want to do, and working with a collaboration for the same reason. So the type of person you do or do not want to get along with.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, she further wants to know, please explain what goes into an intellectual property. What does it take? And do you have to go through someone to secure one?
Well, you can create one easily on your own. You can secure it by filling out forms and sending in money for trademark or copyright. But what exactly goes into an IP is usually a intellectual property that's kind of an original thought. Kind of an original looking property that you might run into trouble doing Barney Bunny, depending upon how you execute that character compared to Bugs Bunny or some of the other bunnies that are out there. Like, for example, the problems that Marvel had, which seemed legendary over Howard the Duck, and how they eventually had to agree with Disney before they bought Marvel to put pants on the thing. Yeah. So in order to try to make it distinctive from Donald. You have to be careful with your IP to make sure it's as original as possible, or that you're telling and going into a direction that you have not seen before. And again, that comes from being educated and knowing the market. So
that's true. Well, speaking of the market, here's a blast from the past. Jody McPhee asks, what is your opinion of the Darwin Cook New Frontier version of the DC Universe? That was one that took the DC Universe kind of into a 50-ish mode. And we've seen different, universes in, just DC alone, like the New 52, then Rebirth and all. Well, let me generalize that a little. How do you feel about the different iterations? We're looking at a possible 5G now too.
Yeah.
Looking at that thing in a couple of months. What do you think about the different iterations of classic characters?
Well, I always thought DC especially should have split their company up into different imprints, because they were very successful for a while doing Vertigo and doing adult stuff or adult-oriented material. They should have split up a long time ago. Their biggest mistake, in my opinion, was Crisis, because they should have never have done it. And it was a bad mistake. And it was a mistake at the time because they said they wanted to simplify the worlds down so that people understood one basic timeline. And being such a big fan of that property, especially looking forward to the annual Justice League Justice Society crossover, of which there had been some classics up to that, pretty close up to that point, I said, you're muffing up the system, because you needed an imprint for Earth 1. You needed an imprint for Earth 2. You needed another imprint now for like an Earth Prime, so that you can run your realistic Batman Year One, and those characters in that era. You needed another one, and it would have been great if they had thought to do it right as they crossed over, when the Justice League Justice Society crossed over on Earth X with the Freedom Force. If at that time, instead of bringing them to Earth Prime or our Earth, if they'd have just kept doing an Earth X book, it would have been incredible. Because that, and that's always something that threw me with the CW show, because how many people, if they found out that there was an entire world that was that the Nazis had won on, wouldn't want to go and combat them Nazis just out of a sense of right and wrong.
Right.
They should have done an Earth X book. They should have done Freedom Fighters, had a little logo with a DC in it with an Earth X on it. That way you can tell them all apart. Plus, one of my other favorite books back during that period was All Star Comics, when they had Leighton and Staten on there, and they grew up Batman, they grew up Superman, had white temples. Batman married Selena Kyle, Selena Kyle
Yeah, Selena
had the Huntress. And they were moving that timeline along and aging those characters. That was amazing. That book is a joy. I love that Showcase Presents of that book, and I look through it quite often because Staten's work on there is impeccable, as is Wood's at that time, especially in the condition that Wood was in at the time. And Leighton's inking work just complemented Staten to no end. It's one of my favorite runs of characters. I have a deep, soft spot for Justice Society anyway. I love all of those characters and think that there's unlimited potential there if they would bother to sit there and actually tap it.
I agree. You just won Trevor Hawkins' heart, I can tell you right now.
Ah.
Russell Allen says, have a great day, everyone. It was great listening to your stories, Randy, and I'll see you in the morning. So
okay.
Cool. Yes, Randy will be on at 9 a.m. Eastern on the morning.
Not until Thursday.
Oh, not Thursday. I don't know what day of the week it is anymore.
You're having a show Thursday also, right?
Yeah, that's true. I'm apparently having a moment too.
Nothing tomorrow. Yeah.
I've been having those. Tomorrow I've got lunch with Luke Stone. So.
Oh, there we go. I've had those moments all day. I keep thinking it's Monday.
Oh, I got through Monday, so I feel pretty proud of that. I don't want to relive it. Don't want to be Groundhog's Day. Now, Sarah asks, what is a YA market?
That's the young adult market that sprung up, the so-called young adult market. I don't think it's that, but it's more adult than young on some of that material. Mm-hmm. That started out with a bunch of prose novels. That's where you got Twilight and I can see the logo, Hunger Games, right. From that era, or that genre of books that you see in the bookstore is labeled as young adult. That's the YA market. The YA market in comics are Scholastic does a series of books that Raina Telgemeier has done, and the Babysitters Club, that's not necessarily aimed at youth and not necessarily aimed at adult. It's aimed at the young adult. Mm-hmm. And their exact sales on those, I question a lot. It's not like Dogman, who's aimed at youth and is like Captain Underpants, which is extremely popular. Dogman's extremely popular. I wonder what those exact numbers are. And to back that thought up is the evidence of what DC recently did to their editor-in-chief that had that corner of the market. That was her primary mission, was to do the young adult market and to foster it. They got their first set of numbers back and she got fired.
Yeah,
she was in the street, and they figure the rumor is that they actually saw their sales figures on those books, and they were like,
yeah, and that's another thing. Comics in the mainstream is becoming about as secure a job as like being a DJ.
Well, and again, that's the mainstream, and the numbers on there that they have whittled themselves down to over a number of factors, and Yes, can't. Like I said, somebody's going to walk in. If they don't, then the retailers are really going to have a rough time surviving.
That's true. Rick Bradley says, maybe this has already been said, but I feel like independent creators have one big thing over mainstream. We have our fingers on the pulse and can listen to fans and not just do whatever we want. I'm looking at you, Joe Kusada, one more day. It's true, Joe, I think he makes a very good point, Rick does.
Yeah, there's a series of tweets that Joe did for a little while there at Marvel when everybody's job was in question, where he took shots of his Cintiq board and going, "Hello, old friend," like he was about to go back to it. But yeah, one more. They're at the point now with the IPs where all they can do is stumble over their own feet and try to come up with the next big hook that they think that they can drag maybe 100,000 sales out of. And they really ought to be ashamed of themselves, because when's the last time they actually had an IP that took off? That was big. Miles Morales was a slow burn. And I don't think he really took off until after the Into the Spider-Verse movie come out, where everybody sat there and went, oh, well, that's what Miles is for. Well, that's kind of cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, but that movie was genius.
Yes.
And you don't get that every day. You don't have that with every single IP. Marvel is still desperately trying to latch Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Squirrel Girl, and Miss America, all of these characters. They've been trying to latch on to something. They just can't get them to hook because they can't, they don't, or they won't find the talent to do it competently.
Yeah.
And it's not the fact that, and also they're trying to change the market overnight, and that doesn't happen. We've been 30 years, like I keep saying, 30 years in a Beavis and Butthead mentality. And all of a sudden they're like going, hey, we need girls in the market. Wouldn't that be wonderful to get all of these other, let's be diverse. Great. Do it. But don't make it your main sales point. Or better still, do it with a little skill and competence so that everybody enjoys it, so that you grow your market instead of castrate it.
Exactly.
And they've, way too much.
Yeah, exactly. Meredith Walker says, yep, I started with a 2-page story in Luke Stone's series. I've got artwork for an 8-page in an anthology, and I'm working on 3 scripts, and that's not even addressing the prose she's working on.
There you go.
Doing the work. That's how you learn.
Yep. We all need to be that prolific. I long for the time when I can actually sit there and do that. I'm going to be like Isaac Asimov and get 6 typewriters rolling in a line. So that
there you go. Hey, those are my heroes, Randy. The guys that beat typewriters to death with their fingers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sarah asks, what is an ash can?
What is an ash can? I love the youth. I really do. An ash can is a book.
Like this format.
Very much like that. Pretty much, I'm not sure exactly why they started calling them ash cans, but I know that they started as far back as the Golden Age. They're an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that's folded in half, or a number of pages that are folded in half and stapled with 1 or 2 staples on the spine. And they started out doing that initially in order to secure copyright and title dates, because back when comics first started raging, they had such a fight for titles, names. Everybody was bumping into everybody because there was gold on the newsstands, literally at a dime a piece. So they were constantly, is this going to work? Is that going to work? Do we need to secure that? We need to secure that. Captain Marvel originally was Captain Thunder. Whiz Comics was originally Thrill Comics, then was Flash Comics, but DC had a Flash Comics, so that turned into Whiz Comics because Fawcett had already printed a couple of pulp magazines way back before that called Captain Billy's Whiz Bang. So they used Billy Batson, Whiz Comics for Captain Marvel. They were desperately reaching for titles. And on a side note, Fawcett, the research that I've done on Fawcett, I want to find a couple people who know Fawcett comics better than I do, because they really seemed like a company that was just like the brat on the block that was like going, you want to do what? Come and get it. A lot. And I'm like, wow, you do what? Yeah, you want comics for a nickel? Here's comics for a nickel. We're doing nickel comics.
That's right.
Let's do it. You want a Christmas gift for a comic book? Well, here's 300 and some pages together. Boom, gift comics. Put that on the stand, see if it'll sell. Master Comics comes out and it's magazine size, big size. You want Master Comics? Boom, here's Master Comics. Oh, we're sorry. We put a Master Man in Master Comics. So it's too close to suit. Well, we'll take him out. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about him. He's gone. He's gone.
Yeah.
He's done. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, just a crazy company. Even right down to once they decided to shut down shop, and I hadn't seen this until a few months ago, after they decided to stop doing Captain Marvel. The last issue of the Marvel family has a story on the cover. It's got a big story talking about them turning up missing. How amazing that was. That was like, yeah, we're leaving DC and on our way out. Here's a few birds. Yeah.
Very meta.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a interesting company. I'm sure somebody has done a book somewhere down the line talking about them, but
if they have, they should.
Just amazing. Yeah.
Now we are actually we have not gone all full tilt Bobby Nash. We have caught up with the comments. We have one more here. We're going to make it the last one of the night. This one is for you, Randy. And Grant Lankard, I'm glad you're here, asks, do you have as much fun doing your show as you do making comics?
Right now, yeah. Actually, I look forward to the show a lot because I get to talk to people and get to discuss interesting things with interesting people. That's I don't mind being on the air talking about comics because it's what I love doing. It's my passion, and I realized early on, very early in my youth, that was my not just my passion, but it was my lifesaver. And it took me a little while. It took me bumming around because I thought the market didn't want me. That they were trying to discourage me as best as they could because I couldn't break into the mainstream. But you find your way. If you want that way, you find it, and you go out and you dig it, and you scrap with it, and you fail with it, and you lose money on it, and then you make money on it, and you gain a huge backstock. You do a lot of conventions, you talk to a lot of people, and you get to know a lot of things. And and I love talking comics and spreading that information around. So because if I can have if somebody's out there like me, and I know there's a lot of people are, and believe me, with the paper here, I realized that there are a lot of people out there just like me who are just looking for entertainment, just looking to a place to laugh and point and lose themselves in entertainment for a while. And if I can help somebody produce work like that to help other people lose themselves, and that's gold, baby. That's what I want to do. And I wouldn't mind doing this. I hope I can do this on a regular basis online for as long as I can, and for as long, if not longer, than I'm producing comics. So
That's fantastic.
let's see how that works. But it's a passion that's grown over time, and there were times that it turned into a job. There were times that it turned into a discouragement. But like I said before, I got a crowdfunding book that I'm aching to get back on. I've been printing shirts and arranging a tremendous shirt order the last 2 weeks that I've been doing commercial work that I just haven't been able to concentrate on the book, and I feel it. I want to get back there, because not just to do that book, but because I know the next book and the next book after that I desperately want to do. We've had some stuff that we've wanted to announce from Indie Volt for the last few months that we want to do for them on the market, that we've been holding off because one thing comes up after another. Variant's been sick, and this has happened, and the bugs have gone on, and it's really been a crazy situation this whole last year. It's been that way for everybody, but now more than ever, you see the need for that entertainment is out there, and that quality entertainment, because to me at least, you're very rarely are you finding it anywhere else. I have to go back and dig up the old comics. I've got go back and dig up the old pulp reprints and sit and read those in order to really lose yourself, to get away. And that's what entertainment is supposed to do, and that I'm aching to get back and do more of that. So
That's great. That's a great answer. And we got some agreement on that. Grant Lankard says, thanks for a good interview. Have a good night, all.
Thanks, Grant.
And thank you for being here, Grant. And Sarah, thank you for your questions. Spectacular show. And
Grant, your cat still has a Charlie Chaplin mustache.
Or would it be Russell Mail from Sparks? Anyway, and Sarah says, thank you for all the insight, Randy.
Oh, you're welcome, Sarah. We do the same thing over on Indie Volt too. So we're always taking comments and weird questions. It's just Varian picks out the strange and the really bizarre ones at times. We get conversation goes crazy sometimes. Yeah,
exactly. Anyway. And thank you, Cindy Cap. Y'all done good. Thanks for playing. Thank you for being
Cindy.
Part of our audience, Cindy. And so, Randy, thank you very much. We said we'd get an hour out of you, and look what happened.
She got 2.5. There you go.
Yeah, I know. You're in that marathon range with like Bobby Nash and all. So thank you again for being here, Randy. I really appreciate it, and you are awesome, dude. I love
Brian,
it.
Thanks so much for having me on. I love talking to you too. So we're talking with you, or talking at you, I guess, more than anything today. It's all been me yapping away. So
no, it's been fantastic. And Joe D. McPhee agrees. Another great shoe. We have two of them. Another very great shoe. So anyway, Randy, in closing here, I'm going to let you have the floor, and we'll put the spotlight on you. Tell everybody where to find you, how they can keep up on your amazing adventures, and then stick around for a minute so I can. I close the show, I can say goodnight to you. So,
yeah, I'm not afraid. I'm sure Varian's got it covered.
I'm sure, and he's probably blaming me for anything that's going wrong anyway, because that's...
Let him blame. He can blame me.
I got broad shoulders. So, Randy, where can they find you, buddy?
Honestly, Brian, I told him I was going to try to make you go long, and you did. So...
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. You can find me on Facebook under Randy Zimmerman. You can find me on Twitter under Randy Zimm. I don't twit very often, but when I do, I twit as Randy Zimm. On Facebook, you're going to see a lot of comedy and just fun stuff, because I don't take Facebook very seriously unless I'm promoting my own material. Other than that, I'm on Indie Volt, the Indie Volt podcast, usually on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. I'm not sure if Varian's going to call it Live Wire or not, but he's talking about it. On Thursday morning, we have the Breakfast Buzz. It's at 9 a.m. Now, all these times are Eastern times. We always take the 9s. And Sunday morning especially, I run my own podcast on the Indie Volt channels called Sunday Funnies, where we look at the lighter and more whimsical side of comics, the more fun and entertaining comics. This next week, we're going to have Glenn Fleming on, who's kicking out a copy of a magazine he did that he had its real professional looking work too, called Comics Unlimited. And he's done an issue that's dedicated entirely to the Golden Age. And we're going to be talking Golden Age comics this next Sunday about and the whole spectrum of things. I'm sure Captain Marvel will come up. I'm sure Donald Duck's coming up, and Carl Barks and all sorts of stuff. We had a great discussion with him last Sunday. We started talking, and he had to come in after a while. He says, I'm editing. I'm not coming in. I'm editing. Send me a link. Send me a link. I got stuff to show you. Please send me a link. Yeah, I got to show you some Frank Bellamy. But anyway, other than that, stay tuned to those channels. I also have a YouTube channel that I don't contribute to often enough called Zimm Geek, Zimmgeek, where every other video is a cartooning instructional, and every other video I talk about the market or some other aspect to some. I've got a couple of them up there about Flint Comics, at least one up there about the Preservers, the nature trail that we talked about earlier. They're fun. They're short little videos that hopefully you can enjoy. I did a 3-part series on Captain Marvel, Fawcett's Captain Marvel, leading through Marvel's Captain Marvel and the history of that name, which is very convoluted in comics. Grand story about a prime story about comic history, copyrights, and all sorts of that other fun things, and how a concept can just light a fire and just inspire just so many other things. It gets crazy. But Zimm Geek channel on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I'm not anywhere else. Don't ask me if I'm on Anchor or Rumble or Glub or wherever. I'm not there. Just those and the Indie Volt podcast, and wherever else any podcaster invites me, like Brian and Rising Tide and here on Title Pending. So
there we go. Excellent, Randy. Thank you again so much, and so much for that OnlyFans link that I thought you'd be going for. But anyway, Randy Zimmerman, thank you again for being here, brother.
I deeply appreciate you having me on. And again, I want to say this publicly. I deeply appreciate all of the talking up that you did of me on Facebook today, because you really impressed my wife. So,
well, that's good.
She's like, you really think you're something, don't you? Been around for a while.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You got the cred for it.
So deep thanks and appreciation to you, Brian.
Well, thank you,
and what you do.
You too.
And you're always invited on our shows whenever you want on, whenever you're awake enough, or we're not butting heads. Program.
I was going to say, if I can wake up before 9 o'clock one of these days, I will happily be on your shows, because I always have a great time. So will you if you watch what Randy does and what Varian does on Indie Volt. That's indievolt.com. Also, Indie Volt on Facebook and their own YouTube channel. So they are everywhere. You need to check them out.
I don't even know if we have as many subscribers as you have over on YouTube.
Well, I just checked. Not that I check it like every hour religiously, but
sure, we know.
Yeah, of course not me. But we're at 403 subscribers. We want to thank everyone. Yeah, I'm astounded and grateful, and thank you to everyone who's subscribed. And we hope we get more, because then we can do more for people and give the spotlight to people like Randy here. So anyway, we're going to. Thank you very much, my friend, and stick around for a while. I'm going to drop you out of the picture here, and then we'll do some business, and then we'll talk for a moment, okay?
Take care, everybody. Stay healthy. Stay good. Keep reading comics.
Exactly. Thank
We'll
you,
see.
Randy Zimmerman. All right. So now I'm going to close out the show again. Thank you to Randy Zimmerman. Check out Indie Volt on various platforms, YouTube, Facebook, indievolt.com. They also have a TV station, radio station. They do all kinds of really cool things. And right now, Varian is probably wondering if I've kidnapped Randy or not. Yes, I have. Anyway, thank you again, Randy Zimmerman. And next week, we're going to have John C. Bruning. We had Jim Beard on a week or so ago. Well, this is his partner in Flinch Books. He's a writer. He's an editor. He's a publisher. He does a lot of this stuff. And if you want to learn how to get your feet wet in the prose and publishing business, again, he's a great resource to have. We're going to have him next week, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And our thanks again to Plasma Fire Graphics for sponsoring this episode. PlasmaFireGraphics.com, when the look of your book matters to you. And as always, be sure to check out our website, risingtide.pub, where you can sign up for our free monthly newsletter. Next issue goes out December 1st. We've got some other big news coming up. So check it out. You'll find out there. We also have a Patreon page. Look for Brian K. Morris, all lowercase, one word. And even $1 will get you something. But anyway, please check out our newsletter, where every month you'll get like special secret deals, secret links, inspirational quotes, let you know what's going on with Rising Tide Publication, mostly motivation, education, and inspiration. If you're watching us on Facebook, on IndieVent, or the Rising Tide Publications page, please give this video a thumbs up if you would. Give it a like, because it helps us in our searchability. Also, please like the page you're watching on, because it's a huge, huge help to all of us. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to check out and subscribe to the Indie Volt channel, please. Also, please, if you like what you see here, give this video a thumbs up, and please subscribe. It just takes a second, doesn't cost more than just a couple seconds of your time. And please ring that bell so you'll be notified of any future broadcasts that we do, whether it's live casts like this or some of the material we're preparing that's going to be a little something extra. And so I think that's everything. We appreciate your being here as always, and huge thanks to everyone who watches us on the reruns, as well as iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Spotify, and other great platforms. Thank you to Geek Insider for powering this show, along with Rising Tide Publications. And so we will not have Nevermind the Furthermore tomorrow morning. I have an appointment, but we'll be back we'll be back on Thursday morning, Thanksgiving Day, with our annual Thanksgiving episode. I will be your turkey, and we'll spend a little bit of time together on and remind each other what we've got to be thankful for. Like, I'm thankful for all of you. So anyway, this is Brian K. Morris. First of all, I've got to vamp for time so I can get to the part where I'm supposed to be. Anyway, okay, we're ready now. Anyway, thank you all for listening and watching. We appreciate all of you being here. And as always, stay smart, stay safe, wash your hands, and don't apologize for being awesome, because that's just what you are. Thank you for watching Clever Title Pending. We'll see you Thursday morning on Nevermind the Furthermore. Have a great night, everyone.
Now, every Sunday morning, longtime independent comics creator and Indie Volt podcaster Randy Zimmerman hosts a discussion on the lighter side of comics, the more whimsical and fun comics out there, on the Sunday Funnies. That's 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday on Indie Volt, indievolt.com, the Indie Volt YouTube channel, and the usual Indie Volt sites on Facebook. Listen in, won't you? Participate in the chat. Let's have some fun. See you there.
From author Brian K. Morris comes an epic tale of armor forged by a god, a hero forged by courage, and an ancient menace poised to re-emerge and threaten our world. Volcana, Rebirth of the Champion, is available on Amazon.com Get your copy today.
Thank you for tuning in to Clever Title Pending, a Rising Tide Publications and Brian K. Morris production. A member of Comic Book Advocating Network and sponsored by GeekInsider.com. Become part of our show with sponsorship and advertising opportunities. For details, contact advertising at GeekInsider.com or visit podcast.geekinsider.com. The Geek Insider podcast is available on your favorite app, so please hit the follow button and share it out to your friends. Because if you don't, you might have to turn in your geek card.